I think we should perhaps begin, except
that we can use the participants.
I think we should perhaps begin.
What's this? Okay. Yeah, no. Yeah.
It's off now. Okay, I'm going to try saying something. Yeah, this is better. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so it's with great pleasure that Maria Luna and I declare this HoMER conference open. We are coordinators of the HoMER network and are co-organizers of this conference, together with the team here at the Sapienza University, film and media scholars Valerio Coladonato, Damiano Garofalo, and Romana Ando, as well as the European Cinema Audience Project, led by Daniela Treveri-Gennari, Pierluigi Ercole, and Lise van der Riva. We have an intense program ahead of us in the seat, 17 panels, 3 workshops on the topic of sharing and linking data. On the top of this, there's a launch of a database on film star Asta Nielsen. We had the opportunity to also listen to artists presenting the work on cinema memory, who have been artists in residence for an earlier research project on cinema memory and the archive. And this year we have several book presentations, thanks to Dalila Mesero, who insisted on the importance of highlighting recent publications and who has organized 2 of these events. Maria and I are new as coordinators for the network, and this should be understood in light of the former ones having held this office for 5 years. And our freshman status has meant that we sort of let the organization evolve more or less organically, as best we could. And it's been an interesting experience sitting in the town of Örebro in Sweden, organizing a conference in Rome with Maria, who's been moving between Barcelona, where she teaches, and Bogota, where she organizes a film festival each year. We wouldn't have been able to pull this off without the love and solid support of the former HoMER coordinators, Clara Paforo-Veduin and Daniela Treveri-Gennari. We want to thank Özge Özyilmaz for web support, the people in the organizing committee who have not yet been mentioned, Pierluigi Ercole, Talita Ferraz, Dalila Mesero, and Katasita. We will also receive support from a local organizing committee, whom we'd like to thank in advance, Samuel Antici and Luana Fedele. A special thanks goes to the Rome team for being so cool in the seat and helpful. Let's hope things run as smoothly as we had planned. Here at Sapienza University, the conference is hosted by the Storia, Antropologia, Religioni, Arte, Spettacolo, to which we are deeply grateful, of course. We will now leave the floor to Romana Ando, who will give an institutional greeting. So, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm on behalf of the department, Sarah's department. The name of the department is the one mentioned before, very complicated. History, religion, anthropology, art, and performing arts. So it's a very complicated name that explains the complexity and richness of our department. So I'm very pleased to welcome you at Sapienza for this year's annual conference on of the HoMER network. The theme of this conference this year is border crossing, and we would like to emphasize that this is a title, a theme that can be read in different ways, and we would like also to underline that border crossing, of course, is something that is related to perspectives from which we analyze and study cinema audiences, but at the same time, we would like also to notice that we are crossing borders, starting again to travel, starting again to be together, to share ideas in presence after those boundaries created by the pandemic. So we are really happy to host in presence this conference and to start again to have this collaboration. I would like to say just a few words about our department. I am deputy director of this department, in particular with respect to the area of media studies, audience studies, film studies. But we have, as you may imagine, starting from our name, we have a very rich number of scholars. We are the biggest department at Sapienza at the moment, and we are growing continuously. And we have scholars from different fields, from anthropology, from religions, from history, of course, from media studies, audience studies, art history, and also fashion studies. So what we think it's the main aspect to underline about this is that we can, or we try continuously to use a multidisciplinary approach to the themes we are going to analyze, to develop inside the department. So what is important is also that, for example, in this case, film studies are part of a wider dialogue together with the other disciplines here at Sapienza. So my colleagues, in particular, Valerio and Damiano, who are scholars in film studies, can, of course, continue to have a great interaction with other members of the department in different fields. And this is a good point in order to starting a real conversation to confront, of course, the kind of methodologies that we need to use in order to develop a topic, to understand, to analyze, to do research on a specific topic. So this is a point that we like as Sarah's department to continue to develop. This is one of the main aspects of our mission. Moreover, I would like to say just a few words about cinema, in the sense that, of course, as you know, Italian cinema audiences were very active, and a huge number of people participated in the exhibition, in the event related to cinema, especially in the decades after World War II, and but also in the next decades. You will discover during this conference also something about the history of cinema in Rome. You will be able to visit some places that are really important for us from a different perspective, again, in terms of memories, in terms of architectures, as a kind of celebrities in our city, because of the, of course, because of the role they had in the past of the people living here in this district in San Lorenzo, but also in the other district of Rome. So cinema theaters are really important in Rome, and we as citizens in this case and scholars, we we would like to sustain, to support all the activities that can celebrate these monuments from different, again, from different perspectives. This conference is not only focused on the past, is also projected on the future. So during the panels we will have, the speeches we are going to listen to, we also discover how cinema audience and cinema studies in general can be approached using new perspectives from a methodological point of view, but also in terms of the relationship between the cinema as a mass medium and of course, a new technological development of cinema too. So this is a way to combine. This is typical of Sapienza. One of the claim of Sapienza is "Il futuro è passato di qui," which is a sort of way to connect the past and the future in these buildings. So you are in the museum, in one of the 18 museums of Sapienza, the Museum of Ancient Art. So you may see the past, but you will discuss and will share with us the future of cinema. So I'm really glad to host you today and for the next few days in this conference, which is really interesting, stimulating, and I'm really thrilled to participate in all the panels and to listen to all the scholars who are here in Rome and online to participate in the conference. So I would like to leave the floor to Damiano Garofalo and Valerio Coladonato, who are my partners in crime for this event. And thank you all for coming and welcome to Sapienza.
Thanks everyone for being here. I will be very brief. First of all, in stressing that for us and proposing Sapienza as the hosting institution for this year's HoMER annual meeting, it was really important that it intersects a number of research interests that we have in the film and media studies section. Just to mention a few of these, for almost 10 years there has been a workshop titled Roma Accord on the social history and memory of cinema going in Rome, which was founded by Andrea Minutz and has been run by Damiano Garofalo, Luana Fedele, and Samuel Antichi, among other colleagues. There's also been, this project has also become a funded research project besides didactic and pedagogic activity with the students. In addition, this year we have launched workshops on creating podcasts about film history. Hopefully you will get a chance to listen to some of those about the memory of spectators in the theaters that Romana was mentioning earlier. There has been a class on audience research for the master's degree program run together by Romana and Damiano. So a lot of experiences that have also emerged from the students' involvement and interests are really well suited for a conference on the exhibition, the reception, and the circulation of cinema. And I would like also to stress a project that Romana is coordinating with Danielle Hipkins titled A Girl's Eye View, on girlhood on the Italian screen since the 1950s. All these experiences wave together, and this conference is for us an opportunity to engage and share with an international community, as well as to gather input and energy to move them forward. All of this would not have been possible without the support of the department, for which we are really grateful. And we thank also the director, Gaetano Lettieri, who couldn't be with us today, and the Faculty of Humanities. We bring also the greetings of the Dean, Arianna Punzi. And I leave the floor to Damiano for a few more thanks and introductions.
Yeah, and I think that above all, we have to thank to the careful, tireless, and constant work of the people who helped us in the organization of this conference. And it has not been easy for a relatively small area such as the Film and Media Studies section of this department. So on behalf of Romana and Valerio as well, we'd like to publicly thank Luana, Fedele, and Samuel Antiki, who are over there. Yeah, Luana and Samuel. And we firmly believe that such work cannot be limited to the organizational aspect, because there is always a scientific and even human exchange behind the willingness to bring scholars from all over the world as you together in a place like this. So for that, we thank you very much. And we would also like to thank the students who will help us and help you orient yourself inside this kind of magical and crazy world of Sapienza, namely Alessia Cirigliano, Lilia De Felice, Alessia Petta, and Serena Valero Larese del Santo. You will find them at the reception desks and inside the classrooms to provide us with organizational and even emotional support. And finally, we would like to tell you two pieces of practical information to help you find your way around better these days. We have included a series of maps in the folder that you received in the occasion of your registration. And in one, you will find directions for moving around the campus between the Faculty of Humanities and the ex-Vetteria Sciarra building. The one you are now in is one of the most, I think, important buildings on campus, which was designed by architect Marcello Pierentini in 1935 and built during the fascist regime. And the building where the rest of the conference will be held, the ex-Vetteria Sciarra, on the other hand, is in the heart of San Lorenzo, which is an historic Roman working class district, but built specifically for railway workers at the end of the 19th century. As you know, we were really close to the central station, the terminal station. And the place is like 10 minutes walking from here. And the location where we'll be staying for the next few days, the Vetteria Sciarra was built in 1936 as a former glass factory, active until the 80s. And then decommissioned since 2012, it has been renovated and has become one of the venues of the faculty and the department. And in another map, we have included some useful information about the neighborhood, so where you can find bars, restaurants, shops, supermarkets, and things like that. And San Lorenzo is a very lively and cozy neighborhood, especially in the evenings. So you will have, I think, no problem adapting to its surroundings. I think that's all, and I think that we will be available for anything over the next few days, whenever you want. So for now, I think that we can wish you a good first day of the conference. So let's have fun and enjoy your stay in Rome. And I think that now we give the floor to Daniela. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to be super brief. I didn't realize that. I'm really emotional to be here because the last time I was in this building was for my graduation ceremony. So it's a long time. I won't tell you how long. I know. So obviously I need to start by thanking the Sapienza gang for their incredible work and for accepting to host HoMER. That's really exciting. And in a way, the HoMER group for willing to sharing and hosting the European Cinema Audience's final event at as part of the HoMER. What we are going to be doing, we will present the European Cinema Audience's project partly in a dedicated panel on Thursday, and then once again as part of the workshop on cinema histories on Friday afternoon. We felt really strongly that rather than organizing an event, a sort of a singular event on the project, we were part of HoMER for twofold reasons. The main one is that obviously border crossing is at the heart of the European Cinema Audiences project. So it was really important to do that. And I think that the Cinema Histories platform will corroborate that. But mostly all our ECA contributors, researchers, investigators, steering committee and national validation members are part of HoMER, and the majority of them are here today. So I think it would have been totally impossible to convince them to betray HoMER for a dedicated ECA conference, no matter how strong those cocktails were going to be. So that's good. So in order to share our project, what I want to do now is show you a 4-minute video that we created. The audience for this video was the participants themselves, so the tone is slightly different. We're working on a short documentary that we will share with the ECA team on Saturday, but this is a sort of a little trailer of that. And obviously, I wanted to comment on that picture just to sort of get you to understand the dedication and the commitment of the ECA team. I'm not going to ask you to guess who they were, but at the moment in which I suggested a theme dinner, they all turned up like that. You could have your moment to guess who's who. So thank you very much. And,
in quegli anni non è che ci fosse molto, non è che ci fosse PlayStation, computer o altro, per cui noi ragazzi di quell'epoca andare al cinema era un divertimento assoluto. Insomma, io agli esami di terza media il regalo che ho avuto, di cui ho ancora grande ricordo, è quella di mio zio che mi disse: se prendi la media del 7 vai a cinema ogni sera.
Ja, det var ju ridå. Alltså jag kan inbilla mig nu att den var röd. Den var nog väldigt gammal och bänkarna var ju så... Det slog ju bänkarna när man... Ja. Och de killarna då, när det var såna här vilda västernfilmer, då slogs det ju på stolar och sådär, för att man blev så exalterad så att man måste vara med i filmen, och det blev nästan som att man red på häst.
Tak buď to, když jsem byl doma s našima, tak ty neděli byl samozřejmě ten kostel, že jo, ale kino po obědě. A největší trest pro mě si naši vymysleli, když mi zakázali kino. Co se stalo většinou tehdy, když jsem se chechtal v kostele, což mě traumatizovalo, protože tam vždycky nějaký můj spolužák vždycky něco, třeba řekl místo chléb náš vedlejší, chléb náš vedlejší, tak řekl chléb náš vedlejší. Já jsem byl smíše chechtal se, maminka už a žádný kino, no, tak to bylo, no.
Blödsinn, zum Beispiel in den Volksliedspielen, da ganz einfach, gab ja Hagebutten, die wurden schön aufgemurlt, dass sie trocken waren. Dann oben haben wir auf den Rang gesessen und dann, wenn das losging, das Kino, die trockenen Früchte in die Masse geschmissen und dann aber schnellstens wieder von oben verschwunden und uns hinten. Das war Juckpulver, exzellent.
Wel eigenlijk de leukste.
Ja, liefst.
Wat was uw favoriete bioscoop?
Wel, de Royal. Maar,
En waarom?
wel, omdat ik mijn liefje daar leren kennen. Nee, echt waar, want dat was zijn vader was daar eigenaar van, dus we konden daar gratis gaan. Dat was een groot voordeel.
I can tell you the exact day, the first time I ever went to the cinema. It was the day my sister was born. My dad had a little motorcycle and he took me to the Foss cinema. We went to see, I think it was probably Abbott and Costello, something like that. I honestly can't remember an awful lot about the actual cinema there, but I know it was really, to me it was tremendous. On the way home in the evening, then my dad stopped at outside the maternity home and said, "That's where your mother and new sister are, and they're coming home tomorrow." So I really remember that. That was really my first experience of a cinema. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I now leave the floor to Maria Luna, who will introduce today's keynote speaker.
Okay, thank you everybody for being here and for all the wonderful work that you are presenting us in each HoMER conference. This is one of sample of everything that is accumulated during the year. So thank everybody for that, really. So I will introduce Ana Rosa Montecón, who is our keynote speaker this year. Ana Rosa is PhD in anthropology, professor and researcher in the anthropology department of Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana Iztapalapa. She is a specialist in cinema, museums, and heritage audience, as well as cultural access policy. She has incited the dialogue between theory and practice in cultural management throughout universities, public and private bodies that work within cultural realm, and participated in regional, national, and international programs of applied research, audiences, formation, and professionalization of cultural managers. Ana Rosa coordinated a working group on cultural policy and consumption by the Latin American Social Science Council, FLACS, that gathered researchers from different Latin American countries. Among her more recent publications stand out Going to Cinema, Anthropology of Audiences, Cities, and Screens, published by Hedisa in 2017. Perspectives on Mexican Cinema, published by Procine in City of Mexico, 2019. Latin America Cinemas in Circulation, In Search of the Lost Audiences, coordinated in collaboration with Leandro Gonzalez, a book that joined many researchers from different parts of Europe, especially in Latin America, published by Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana and Juan Pablo's editorial. This book was awarded Best Cinema Essay in Latin America and the Caribbean in 2020 by the Foundation of New Latin American Cinema. She also published Ibero-American Audience of Mexican Cinema of the Golden Age, Analogic and Digital Trajectories of a Shared Identity. This is published also by Procine in City of Mexico in 2029. You also can consult some articles of Ana Rosa in English, so as New Processes of Urban Segregation, the Reorganization of Urban Exhibition in Mexico City, Television and New Media in 2003. Evidence of a Transnational Arts and Health Practice, published in 2013. This is about methodology, a contextual framing for comparative community-based participatory arts practice in the UK and Mexico, with Annie Rao, published in the Arts and Health Journal. We are delighted to have you here. Thank you for accepting our invitation. So I give the floor to Ana Rosa for her talk about golden age of audience in Latin America. Welcome, Ana Rosa.
No. Well, I'm so glad to be surrounded by so many partners in crime. I'm used to go to seminars in film studies or in anthropology where the researchers that have the passion for audiences are so little, so few. So be surrounded by you and me, sharing my passion and, well, not only for research, but also for this kind of research. So makes me very happy. Thank you for inviting me. Well, thanks to Maria Luna, to Asa Journo, to Pierre Ercole, well, the coordinators of this HoMER conference. And I will start now. Well, as you all know, audiences have received little attention throughout the history of cinema, which has been in general as synonymous to the history of films and all that is related to it. Although the study of historical film audiences is the oldest field of research in film studies, as Wilder Reis, Malvi, and Mears have noticed, well, nowadays, well, we see a field that is growing. Despite the comprehensiveness of global scale cinematographic research, the studies about spectators and exhibition spaces are minority against the proliferation of analysis and essays about the array of mythical characters, genres, themes, and fossil films, directors, and all dimensions of the industry. As you know, well, critical transnationalism hasn't been the exception. Will Haiby and Song Hu Lim have pointed out the scarce studies that consider audiences as a fundamental part of transnational cinema analysis. Well, what I want to present you today is a study that considers that the main point of the golden age of Mexican cinema was not about the films, or was not only about the films and the political and social circumstances, but was about the audiences. I will try to show you that groups and individuals were really important building this this special phenomenon. And as Andrew Tudor told us, well, groups and individuals use the massive as a factory of their social life. So I will try to point out how these audiences use the massive, use the cinema to build some conditions that were really important at that time. What happened with the circulation of the Mexican cinema of the Golden Age? I'm talking about a phenomenon that started from the 30s to the 50s. It lasted more or less 2 decades, and it continued in different countries for a long time. Well,
Mexican films reach movie theaters in all Iberoamerica. I'm talking about 21 countries, more or less, the USA, and some European countries, even, for example, Yugoslavia, France, different countries that didn't speak English. And what was really amazing was that spectators would go watch their movies, favorite actors, or listen to some music. And as some specialists have pointed out, this cinematography was intensely loved by its audience. We could see that no matter how important it was, the Mexican exhibitions, well, the Hollywood's preponderance was always on the top, but in some countries there was Mexican movies could have the second place in screenings, except in the Argentinian in Argentina and the Spanish movies in Spain. We can recognize that there was an heterogeneous impact in the distinct countries. There were characteristics that varied locally in consonance with the difference with social description. Different classes had different relationships with Mexican movies, and also, well, with education level. Some researchers like Carlos Monsiváis, that was a Mexican researcher that really paid a lot of attention to this phenomenon. He called that he said, there was even a cultural agreement between the screen and the audiences. It was a happy time of integration between two communities, the one in the screen and the one on the seats. There was a psychic and cultural proximity between the industry and its frequenters. How to explain the success of Mexican cinematography in all these territories? What roles did the audiences play? How was the film's transnationalization transformed once the Golden Age finished? I want to take advantage of this opportunity to talk to you, showing the theoretical discussions that several Latin American investigators have done around this phenomenon since the last third of the 20th century from a cultural perspective. I will cover and I will talk to you about the contributions of Néstor García Canclini, Jesus, Martín Barbero, Carlos Monsiváis, and Julia Tuñón mostly, so you can know how this phenomenon has been reflected on in Latin America. The empirical base of my talk comes from the research Ibero-American audiences of Mexican cinema of the Golden Age, analogic and digital trajectories of a shared identity that Juan Carlos Dominguez and I coordinated. We sought to give visibility and a face to the discourses and experiences of 50 audiences from 20 Ibero-American countries. Mostly we did the research during the pandemic, so all the interviews were made by WhatsApp and all digital Zoom and all those researches. We do some archive research. It's a bottom-up perspective, that allows to rethink the history of cinema as the history of the experience of cinema, as Bill Therese Malby and Mears have pointed out. So let's start. How can we explain what were the conditions that gave the opportunity to the Mexican cinematography to be so important around so many countries? Well, it started all with the sound of films. The problem that the USA had, was that to change when the sound appeared, the visual language turned into audiovisual and lost all its universality. So the intertitles were really easy to translate, but the English spoken dialogues were not. So there were two alternatives. The first one was the subtitles, and American films found resistant by the people who couldn't read them. So there was there an opportunity to Spanish language films to reach the market. And the dubbing, the original actors spoke in other languages, and that didn't work at all. But also, well, there were subtitles that worked for others. This was a weakness that later on, I will speak about it, later on became a strength for the English, for the USA movies. Well, the second condition was the Second World War. Argentina and Mexico embarked on the conquer of the Ibero-American market, but the USA productions were reduced, and the USA weakened Argentinian film industry because the Argentinians supported the other, supported the other group in that the USA were not supporting. And so all the support, the economical, the technical, and raw material support went to Mexican cinema. So it was with the condition that the country stood in solidarity in the war against the Axis. The USA continued to export its English-spoken movies with subtitles, even though some Mexican films managed to achieve major performances. The majority of Latin American countries crowned the premier list with North American products, while Mexican productions were in second place. We can see, well, how the Mexican industry developed. In the 30s, there was only one movie produced, and just 20 years later, we were producing 124 movies. These are, well, characters that were really important: Pedro Infante, Jorge Negrete, and of course, Luis Buñuel, that lived for several years in Mexico. Well, he produced very important films. What happened inside Mexico? Well, there was a solid state support. The model of state support in Mexico was an integrated one. Only Cuba has this kind of support that you can see that the state was consolidating production, distribution, film exhibition. The state was everywhere in film industry, and that was very important for the development of the industry. They were, well, private businessmen daring stability through the development of a guild. Well, internal development dynamic encouraged the directors, the photographers, actors, and actresses, creativity that produced a more diversified set of films with artistic quality and social values. There was a creation of a successful star system and a robust internal and external distribution and exhibition apparatus. This was a really key thing. There were 3 distributors, Pelmex, Cymex, and Azteca Films, in different territories, and they play a very important role in allowing the different Mexican films arriving to different countries. Well, but I want to concentrate on other keys of success. Thank you. A golden age is not only of Mexican cinema, it has been studied as that. Movies, directors, creative boom, political international conditions that favor it. We can recognize diverse keys that brought the recognition, identification, and appropriation of the Mexican filmic offer in different moments by the dynastic audiences. We can recognize, for example, that it was also a golden age for movie theaters, which grew and were diversified. They played a very central place in the audience experience, as the image that you have show that the places were as important as the movies were. Cinema responded to the broad population masses that, due to industrialization, which gave origin to cinema itself, concentrated in the great cities and represented a growing entertainment demand. We can think of cinema spaces, we can think of the movie theaters as memory places, as Pierre Nora has pointed out. Community senses, affective maps, identity marks that act as powerful vectors in the exercise of collective memory. Local formation centers of sociability, they were also leisure and identity bonds, turned them into memory anchors that act as signals of recognition and belonging to group. Movie theaters were considered, well, the spaces of modernity in the accounts of all the memories. We recognize that we have made a naturalization of movie theaters. We have think that, well, its ubiquitous presence of movie theaters all around the world has made them familiar, a globalized space that doesn't belong to any particular country. But we have to understand the specific places where movies are watched. We know that this is fundamental for the comprehension of the development of the cinematographic phenomenon in different ages, in different regions, and for different audiences. In the interviews, we realized that people deeply remember, for example, the monumental movie theaters, but also the neighborhood cinemas. They call Piojito cinemas, like Little House, or Franela cinemas. That Franela is a very cheap jacket, or t-shirt. So, well, they also think about itinerant cinemas, the drive-ins, the cinema clubs and art venues, hotels, housing complexes and commercial streets, summer screens, winter theaters. There is even one people who told me about the tree cinemas. I will come back with this, and improvised screen spaces. It was a diversified offer, everything welcome people to stay. The spaces, the furniture, the film of a duration, the voluntary stay that lasted for several decades. You can see, well, that all this diversity show a demonstrably social phenomenon that unsettled the common patterns of leisure segregation in many countries, but they also provided opportunities for discrimination, exclusion, and distinction, as I will think that. Well, I inserted some of the dialogues we had. This is from Álvaro Sanjurjo Tucón from Uruguay, and he says, notice that Uruguay in the year 1953 has 11 million spectators in Montevideo, and a city with less than 1 million inhabitants, and 2 million spectators in the entire country, which are less than 2 million inhabitants. That means there was a passion for cinema. Here is the reference to the 3 cinemas. Back then, the majority of cinemas in Cartagena, Colombia, had no roofs. They waited for the nighttime to project. Not everyone could enter the cinema because of the ticket price. That is where Arbol 3 cinemas are born. Next to the cinema, and because they had no roof, neighbors would put wood boards in the trees and charge less for the spectators that watched the movie climb above the wall. Another one from Colombia, Pedro Navarro. It was awesome to go watch Cantinflas movies. Cantinflas is a comic, when we managed to gather the money for the cinema. Well, another reason to explain the success of this phenomenon has been pointed out by Nestor Garcia Canclini, and he said that, well, we can see that there was a cinematographic field really strongly integrated. You can see that the productive, the communicational, and the reception factors were articulated to form this cinematographic field. Integration of producers, director, artists, intermediaries, and audience made possible one of the processes with highest economic and aesthetic performance in Latin American cultural history. although he refers only to the Mexican cinematographic field in the sense that Pierre Bourdieu conceptualizes the artistic of the literary field, is an interpretation that can be fully applied to Latin America as a whole. One important thing is that it was an intermediate process. We are not talking just about movies. We can see the feedback between the cinematographic media, the radio, the record, the editorial, the news industries, and in the diverse countries. Film stars, for example, made promotion tours and frequented the theater, cabaret, and radio, where besides live presentations, chains transmitted the film's music in their prime time. There was a circulation of musical rhythms and songbooks, accents and vocabulary, publicity, posters and pictures, voices, text, images in radio, newspapers, specialized and spectacle magazines. And in the interviews, it all comes all the time. People will remember not only movies, not only the theatrical spaces, but also the music, the stars, the radio narrations, and all that. We could also recognize that there was built there a transnational cinematographical matrix. We could see that Mexican films circulated, making co-productions with different countries, Colombia, Cuba, Spain. Cinematography, for example, there were very important cinematographic adaptations of great Latin American literary pieces. And also the incorporation of actors, actresses, and musicians from other Ibero-American countries in Mexican films, as you see here, well, with Jorge Negrete and Carmen Sevilla, no, in Spain, but there are a lot of examples of this. This transnational cinematographic matrix, as have Lusnig, Eisenberg, and Quantarolo pointed out, that allowed Mexican cinema to connect with internal cultural traditions. So it was not only the Mexican culture going to different spaces, but it was a phenomenon of really a cultural circulation of different symbols, different values, stories, culture. And they represent not only a national perspective, but really indeed the Ibero-American region as a whole. We can see the wide set of exchanges and communication of national and Ibero-American identities in different areas and levels. For example, in this case, what Doña Bárbara is, well, a Colombian, a Venezuelan original story, but you can see here nationality Mexicana. Mexicana wrote with, not with an X of Mexico, but you can see also the mixture here, no? So this phenomenon was a phenomenon of internalization of symbolic words. We could see that Mexican cinema recreated imaginaries, spread stereotypes, impulse modernization processes. You could see in the films, well, the prototypical characters, topics, and values. Love to motherland, recognition of the rural war and the nuclear family as pivots of the national community, challenge to the authority and to the codes imposed by the high classes, some gender roles that are really specific. They were key to identify building of several Latin American sectors. You could see, for example, in these black angels, black little angels could be the name. Now it's completely criticized because, well, it's the typical racist perspective with actors that were not really black, no? And so they use all these sources. But you can see that here, for example, you can see the mixture and the link between modernity and melodrama, as Jesus Martin Barbero has pointed out that in Latin America, modernity was linked much more to media and to well, to mass media, it became a way of introducing modernity. Intermediality favored that the majorities would appropriate modernity in continuity with oral, narrative, musical, scenic, and popular iconography memory. Mexican cinema nourished from the radio, not only in terms of music. For example, in Cuba, Félix Vicainet and Caridad Bravo Adams were really very important in the 30s, well, from the 30s, and the radio soap operas diffusion times turned into sacred spaces. I interviewed some people that told me that all social activities would stop and even cinema shows would be delayed to transmit in the same venue the radio episode that premiered. So there was coordination between the different industries so they could nurture each other and not compete. So that idea of cultural imperialism must be really put in focus, because movies really conquer the Ibero-American audiences, encouraging this internationalization of symbolic words. Cultural industries integrated in an imagery that made Latin American people feel close to each other, as Jesus Martin Barbero has pointed out. So it's wrongly considered as cultural imperialism, as it was characterized in some countries of the region and by researchers such as Robert McKee, a binary concept that understands its triumph as of the reach of the distribution of pieces in the external market, or conceives it in a unidirectional manner, the human and cultural capital flows that wave ties between the countries. So this is really not the case. This is Angeline from Colombia. She says, when I started watching Mexican movies, I felt them very closely, and I felt more and proud when Bogota and Colombia were mentioned in a film or even a word. When I heard that Alicia Caro and Sofia Alvarez, that are Colombian actresses, when I heard that they are Colombian, my chest rises and I say, we were in the age. I mean, Mexico gave the opportunity to two Colombians to act and triumph in it. This is Jenny Kristolovic from Peru. For me, I think that Mexico, or at least the word Mexico, all that is Mexican was going through me, body and life, no? Forming a part of my physical formation, maybe with all those songs, jokes, movies, the grandmothers and the uncles' comment. It has been a loving encounter with Mexican culture. René Ernesto Silveira Benítez de Cuba. He said, Mexicans have the same character that Cubans. In their empathy, the music, the Mexican music was very accepted here. Then we felt very united, no? United in the character, the language, the Spanish we spoke, and we understood. This is from Guatemala, Marta Lucrecia Diaz. We have a lot in common in Latin America. I think that is why Mexican film is treated as our own, because all these common things we have. And this from Panama, Jacinto Gaez Luna. What I remember most of the golden age of Mexican cinema is that in the 40s and 50s, we had stepped over North American cinema. That was not really the case, but well, people felt that we were doing that. What I want to stress in my presentation now is that audiences practices were a key factor. The forms of appropriation and recognition that the popular masses made of media and of themselves through media was a key factor in the success. Audiences made their own and cultural values, projected and adapted them to daily life. They generated a diversity of ways to identify as a group, as a nation, as a continent through experiences that had different sides, emotional, sentimental, and political. The first one is that, well, modernization, I want to give you some context. These decades were decades that all the Ibero-American countries were passing through, well, in difference in reach and speed, through process of modernization and industrialization. It started from the 30s, but They continued through all these decades. And you could see that all these processes were, well, state-driven. There were process of import substitution, work in the workforce employment, public investment in transport and communication infrastructure. So the cinema could form part of these processes of modernization. There was the creation of an internal market detonated, well, this process of industrialization and modernization detonated great population movements from the countryside into the cities. In some countries like Argentina, besides, all this was accompanied by immigration from Europe. You can see, have an idea that in the 1925, barely a quarter of the Latin American population live in urban zones. 25 years later, you can see that percentage increased to 41, and in 1975, it reached 61%, consolidated the region as the most urbanized in the developing world. So we are seeing that a lot of people were moving, were becoming migrants, transforming their spaces of life. So you can see that in many senses, this was also a golden age of cities. The cities were growing. We are talking about the 30s, the 40s, 60s, even the 60s. The image is from a Luis Buñuel movie that it's called The Illusion Calls in Tram. And this tells the story of the end of trams in a tour that shows the city in this constructed effervescence and full expansion. So what you can see is economic growth, territorial demographic expansion, urban development models based on social integration and corporatism by the welfare state that was supporting all this. And in many senses, why can we tell that it was also the golden age of the audience? I think that further than the context reactionary character and the schematism of form, cinema will connect with the hunger of the masses to be made socially visible. In the interviews, people all the time makes reference to this, that finally I could see characters that are just like me. So that way people go to the cinema to see not only the movies, but to see themselves, to see in a sequence of images that more than arguments gives them gestures, faces, ways of speaking and walking, landscapes, colors. By allowing the people to see themselves, as Jesus Martin Barbero has pointed out, they become nationalized. So we see a phenomenon of the building of the state, the building of a nation by the cinema. So we can see in this success a phenomenon of nationalism and visibility. Urban masses were colliding with a normalized society in its class segregation. So you can see that the movies reflect this clash between the new population that didn't know how to move in the city, didn't know how to manage the new codes. So cinema becomes decisive for national integration and the experience of modernity by mediating between the almighty state and the masses without democratic traditions. If the good society, says Monsiváis, excludes spectators, might cinema, radio, and comics build a society that accepts them? So you could see the contradictions. So there was some institutions that were opening the economic possibility of getting a job, of participating in a union, or different kinds of participation. But at the same time, many other spaces were still closed. So the cinema were the first of these places, the places to open up. This is Herbert Navarro from Guatemala. When I worked in the Circo Navarro, there were no videos, but some parts did get recorded from the circus showing those times, the 40s, the 50s, but they were lost. However, when I watch Cantinflas' movie, where he is in the circus, it looks exactly the same. Cantinflas is a comic. So you can see there, well, this visibility. Yolanda Margarita Morales de Venezuela. I love those Mexican films where humble people taught lessons to people with a lot of money, life lessons. So I think that gestures and linguistic peculiarity legitimation, you could recognize that the stars provided not only faces, but also bodies, voices, particular ways of speaking to the popular and medium sectors represented. Cantinflas, this is Tintan, resortes, mantequilla, pronounced expressions that were adopted in other sectors in many countries. For example, I could recognize in Cuba that the verb cantinflear, cantinflas had a very particular way of speaking and not being clear. So this use of the verb cantinflear is repeated in different parts of the Ibero-American country to talk about politicians and to talk about people that says things that without explaining. So this is also a political project, no? To turn countries into nations through the creation of an identity, a national feeling, and this is where cinema is so important, no? A process that would prove contradictory by its several opposing forces. For example, the music in the national identity battles in Colombia. You can see in many of the movies that Black musicians appear. And these Black, the Caribbean rhythms incorporated in Mexican films put in the center the Black orchestra musicians and dancers, giving recognition moments to populations whose cultural input was not seen in their own country. For example, in Colombia, the vals and the bambuco were the popular music that were accepted and were associated with a bucolic and harmonious mixed race nation. But there, the Black race was completely out of recognition. So the Caribbean population, the Black Caribbean population, saw there an opportunity of this recognition, social recognition and visibility. The search for recognition is evident with this testimony, for example, that refers to a character that is from a later period than the Golden Age. It's called the India Maria, the Maria Indian. She, says Monsiváis, comes from the frivolous theater tradition where easy laughter is obtained by imitating the dedicated search for language by the Indios, which, by the way, is also present in Cantinflas. And this was by Pedro Navarro in Colombia. For example, you see India Maria, yes? The dumb peasant who is also smart, and that happens in Colombia. You can see that there a person might be seen as dumb, but it is not. The peasant or the rower, the bus driver are very similar here. I mean, the idiosyncrasy is almost the same. That is, all this has been considered as the other education, the learning of urban life and of the re-elaboration of the tensions between tradition and modernity. Movies help understand the changes of agrarian life and the new ways of expressing feelings. So you can see in the movies, well, a space for the implicit building of new behaviors and values, an ambient for the construction of a sense of community. So not only was important what they see, but where they congregate, the different places, places to see the movies. While many local and regional bonds disintegrate with the migration process, urban popular culture becomes a great cohesive element for society. Movie theaters become key scenes to the construction of a community sense. In the neighborhood cinema, one acquires what helps to live in an expanding city, that sense of intimacy within the multitude that is expressed with a lot of intensity in the interviews. Well, this is Maria Felix And I really love this interview with Ricardo Chicajelis, that is a Colombian cinema researcher from Cartagena. He said, more than being a foreigner producing influence, Cartagena's Afro-Caribbean population saw in a famous artist, Maria Felix, the resources to face racial discrimination. When the Black women of Chambacu is the poorest of the neighborhoods in Cartagena, wanted to look like Maria Felix, is that they discovered there is a difference between the ways of dressing in the public and in the private space. To look like Maria Felix serves many purposes. First, not to appear so Black, and to not appear so Black within the ethno-racial system is something to negotiate, through which resource, through the practice of wearing something, how you wear your makeup, how you behave is also important. So they look for the tools to negotiate in their social racial system. This idea of the another education is not so simple. There are contradictions in this idea. The relation with films was more complex than one of learning teaching. Julia Tuñón has questioned understanding of film as a type of textbook that penetrates through the emotional. So we can see these contradictions. In multiple aspects, filmic images would go one way and the reality another way. That was the case, for example, of the growing female participation in paid labor that transformed the Mexican family life, well, the Latin American family life habits, mobilizing the conservative apprehension with movies that lamented the family disintegration and the dangers of modern life. There were allusions to a real problem, the problem of the families disintegrated or transforming, and the danger. But the movies offer a tricky solution in a message that didn't prepare women for the new social role. So you can see that women could see in films all these apprehensions that provoke them. But going to the movies and being able to talk about this constitute a fertile field to project their dreams and to elaborate the transformation that the new collective life left to. So you can see also surreptitious modernization. Mexican films show archaic narrative schemes and strong ideological momentums, exaltations of machismo, racism, intolerance, a praise for the class division. This is Pedro Infante playing an Indian role, no? And this another one of him. But as Monsiváis has pointed out, while it reiterates devotions, it imposes modernizations. On the one hand, insisting the supreme value of honor, the degradation of prostitutes, the monogamous beauty of women, the sacred respect to family and property. But the disparity between what is declared and what is hinted turns cinema into the urban culture center of gravity for a while. For example, the sensuality of the prostitutes transcends any incitation to monogamy. And the novelty of language, of customs are imposed in the slums and small cities despite the immobile message. So you can see, well, this is the Cuban Ninon Sevilla that was, well, very, very there. Which sectors were attracted by the Mexican cinemas, the Mexican films? Well, based on certain signs and interviews to spectators, we can formulate some hypotheses. It seems that popular sectors and middle classes were initially attracted to cinema, but you can also recognize that in the peak period, high classes approach. And with the decay of the quality of Mexican production, only the popular sector continue to consume those films. There is a study in a book that will appear soon. Claudia Bosé found, for example, that in the decade of the 40s, Mexican and Argentinian films stopped being perceived as second-class products, targeted only to neighborhood cinemas, and were exhibited in the premiere billboard and commented by chronicles and articles in specialized magazines. Another hypothesis, there were certain Mexican productions that the popular sectors liked. Some others were preferred by the intellectual groups and upper classes, and some were multi-class. This is Álvaro Sanjurjo Tucón from Uruguay. When I saw the movie Roma, the very recent one, with that world of patrons and servants, I remember the neighborhood cinemas from Uruguay in the 50s that had on Tuesday and Thursday the so-called Spanish-spoken popular cinema program. It was the Mexican movies that the house employees from that neighborhood would watch. But the neighborhood had a cinema club on weekdays that showed other kinds of films. The movies from El Indio Fernández, others like El Compadre Mendoza, El Peñón de las Ánimas, Mexican films that would premiere in the first category venues. Different phenomenon, Cantinflas. Cantinflas had all kinds of multitudes. Finally, well, in the 50s, this transnationalization process started to decay in Europe, Uruguay, Chile, and Argentina. In other countries like Cuba, Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, Peru, and the USA, Mexican films continue to be screened for one more decade. In some of these countries, even longer. For example, in Colombia, I had the news that even 30 years later, some films continue being screened in certain occasions. So, well, the crisis was caused by the falling of creativity, the death of some stars, the struggle of producers to respond to a changing world, the increase in the university population that was critical of commercial cinema, and also, well, the dismantling of the state cinematographic apparatus that started in the 70s, and, well, in the 80s, the closure of the distribution branches that had been really a key element. Hollywood, well, Hollywood's reign continue to create a very visual and basic story system. Toby Miller has pointed out that the sound was a weakened point for Hollywood, but they tried to develop this basic visual story system that is part of its force. They renovated thematically with even more formal resources, a multi-million publicity campaigns, and something that is linked to the renewal of the exhibition that is, well, by the end of the 20th century, the strengthening of the screen hoarding after the reorganization of exhibition associated to malls, they are completely owning all these new venues. This obstructed the sustained screening of the Ibero-American movies throughout the region. But there are some good news. There is a never-ending story for these old cinemas. And so I could see that despite the decay of the movie theaters, other screens continue showing the Mexican movies. The television was very, very important in many Latin American countries, cinema clubs as well, film festivals, the place where the video centros, the place where you could rent videos. The spectators, movie collectors, for example, well, Julia and Leverato have shown how this possibility of the multiplication of a screen, well, diversifies cinephile practices. Piracy was also very important in this continuity of the Mexican Golden Age period. And it was extended temporarily, and especially by the relationship between Ibero-American audiences and the Mexican cinema of the Golden Age. This is René Ernesto Silveira. I have managed to collect, because here in Cuba, it is very hard to get movies via internet. I have around 30-something Tintan movies. He was a really specialist in Tintan movies, this comic that I just showed you. And I see them all the time. I have them in video. Cantinflas too. Nowadays, I have 4 video players. You would get them through people who travel, and naturally, they were out through thought about business and came here and sold it. From the 4 that I have, 3 are still working, and those are the ones I use. I used to record movies from the TV emissions. Here they show some movies called Something to Remember and Yesterday Cinema. That way through the years, I acquire a bank of movies. Well, it is that I have a thing like a collector's mania. I have around 400 or 500 movies from North America, Spain, France, Italy. I have a lot of movies from Mexican cinema too, which was a classic back then. And I have them here and I see them now and then, no? To remember is to live. And so I pass, as they say, life. And this is Maria Fernanda Arias Osorio de Colombia. She says, here in Cali, Colombia, you would find the agacheses, that is the, that you bend. How they call here the people who take a blanket and put the products there. Buyers have to bend down to take them. There was a man who sold pirate DVD copies. He was super specialized in Mexican cinema. Well, it has continued through digitalized. In recent years, users of digital media share content, make recommendations, explore, learn, verify, like, comment, open accounts and web pages, redesign, take part in fanatic networks on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, among others. All these spaces, digital spaces, have opened a new era for a distinct relation with Mexican movies and their visual, musical, and narrative universe. You can see, I would just show you, this is when you broke up with a toxic boyfriend, but he's still looking for you. And you can see Maria Felix, Diva, Cine Mexicano. No? So this is the idea of how you connect, how people are connecting. Users will reconnect with their parents and grandparents' memory. In the memories all the time, they told us, well, I discovered Maria Felix, for example, in a TikTok. And I asked my grandmother and she said, oh yes, Maria Felix. And so this is reconnection with the parents and grandparents' memory. Also, well, movements like the feminists and LGBT plus reinterpret and reappropriate their characters. They transform, well, the sociability surrounding film watching. And you can see also, well, a distance is taken from its implicit values, but the fascination and rapport are renovated. Look, this is Angeline from Colombia. From 2016, I started, one Saturday I was there, like we say in my city, desparchada, without anything to do. I went to YouTube and I see Escuela de Vagabundos. This is a film. And I just watched and fell in love with Pedro Infante. I said, look, and waited for the credits and saw he was named Pedro Infante. And I started looking for Pedro Infante's movies. He led me to Jorge Negrete in Dos Tipos de Cuidado. And that got me started with Jorge Negrete. Jorge Negrete led me to Maria Elena Marquez with all the films where he and Gloria Martin appeared. From there, I fell in love with him. From his movies with Gloria Marin, Maria Elena, and I started. From that moment on, I haven't stopped watching Mexican cinema for the golden age. See, she's 31 years old. So for us, it was amazing how this relationship was renovated. He's Antonio Cruz Lopez from Spain. If you want to know where I started watching Mexican films, it was through YouTube. And you will tell me, how is it you ended up watching Mexican movies? It was that due to the pandemic, from something apparently negative, I turned into something positive. It was the thing that we needed to be locked home and had to watch television. And you see, with television, it is one bit of the movie and 7 minutes of advertisements. I hook onto YouTube. Spanish movies don't give you the chance to watch it complete. And I casually said, Mexicans do let you do that. And I don't know why they put you a movie each day on YouTube. Each week they put a movie and I became a fan. he is, well, the double of the recent interviewer. But you can see, well, the relationship is completely different. So this, I took this from from the Facebook and said, men as subject of desire of women, women as sexual object. That is how the patriarchal system works. So it's completely different, the relationship. This one is Maria Felix, a feminist ahead of her time. Facts like earning more than an actor in his time predict the feminist boom and denounce machismo at the great social damage of social life. The so-called Doña advancing in though of her epoch, in a time when the gender gap was debated in the film industry and the earning of actors and actresses were miserable. Maria Felix brought it more than 50 years ago. This is the last one. Good morning. We want to recommend this Mexican film called Dos Tipos de Cuidado from the golden age of Mexican cinema, starring Jorge Negrete, Pedro Infante, Carmelita González, and Yolanda Varela. This movie reflects the machismo that back then was thought to be correct. This machismo is the cause of the movie's plot because Pedro and Jorge did not respect women, especially their love interests. I want to finish with some reflection of the theory that is under this analysis. Well, as I told you, well, audiences have received little attention throughout the history of cinema. You can see that in the last quarter of the 20th century, in Latin America, there were a group of researchers that more than a unified school of thought, you could see a thought mosaic appear in Latin America with traits proper to the continent, but in an intense dialogue with Europe and the United States. There were several theoretical standpoints that complement the research on reception and cultural consumption in the region. They were all the time dialoguing with the work of Bakhtin, the Constanza School. Gramsci was very, very important. The Birmingham School, Bourdieu, the uses and gratification theory, psychoanalysis, Paulo Freire, Michel de Certeau, and all these was in dialogue with the research made in a multidisciplinary area like communication, anthropology, sociology, literature, and history fields. Jesus Martin Barbero was, in a certain way, the leader of a fundamental rupture in the continent's communication field. He proposed that we need to leave the media center analysis to displace it from a theory to cultural mediations. That is, the daily practices that structure communication social uses. For example, family, daily life, neighborhood and friend level, social temporality, and cultural competence. For him, communication is not restricted to the dynamics of media and the message's content, but rather it acquires meaning within culture and particularly on mediations. So there is a movement that essentializes and decenters the research. Media do not exhaust communication. They are articulation spaces of other meaning making practice like I hope I could show you. The notion of audience as the end of media operation that is in the root of this less paying attention of audiences is questioned. You can see the scarce relevance on the role of spectators in previous analyses. So in all these authors is a rediscovery of subjects under action, previously overshadowed by the importance of structures and systems. That is why Gramsci is so important. So there is an attention to hegemony, to see all the daily negotiations, and the reprisal of cultural consumption as a sphere of production instead of a mere reproduction. You can see all the analysis here as as a symbolic relevant activity to intervene in one's own life. This idea of a tool to do things with what you see, what you dream, what you do with films. The possibility to use these to build, maintain, and transform social relations. So I hope sorry for my not so good English, but I hope I could transmit the passion that this phenomenon gives me. Thanks. Yes, don't know if there is time. There is time for
Some questions? Shall I?
Yes, yes.
I think we can, right? Any comments or questions you'd like to pose?
Other processes that resembles the.
Thank you very much for your moment. I was wondering if you could say something about the impact on non-Hispanic parts of the community.
I can listen. So you.
He's asking if you could say something about the responses also on non-Spanish speaking audiences or in the region.
Yes, we interview people in Brazil, and it was amazing because it was very, very important in these places, and it's very related. Well, in Brazil, for example, the Black population was really very attached to these films. To see Black people being so important in the plots, so we could realize that, and we thought at the beginning that the difference in language could be a problem, but it wasn't. Yes, they were very open to subtitles. It really worked for many, I think like 2 or 3 decades. Brazil was one that lasted more than Argentina, for example, where the European-oriented audience didn't have, and the Argentinian industry was also important. So they were much more open than the Argentinian or Uruguayan audiences. Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much for your fantastic talk, fascinating project. Could you go into the selection of the respondents in all these different countries? How do we go about to reach these people?
Well, we tried to. It was complicated because we couldn't travel because of the pandemic. So we tried to look for different ages. We tried to look for people from urban and from rural areas. We tried to search for women, men, people from different gender. So it was like that. We finally got to 50 respondents, and this is a project in process. So I'm going to do research in this year in Cuba, in Argentina, and in Colombia. And finally, I will be able to travel and to expand the different interviews.
Are the people you interview all fans? Because it seems that they are all quite positive and enthusiastic about cinema. So was the selection made based on their interest in it?
No. It was for us. It was amazing that, because we were just looking people who had seen. We were looking for older people, but well, a lot we could also reach them by the internet. So we were looking in YouTube, the comments. We selected, and for example, I think like 100 the best movies. So we were looking, and looking at the comments, and then we look if they had an account in another, and we wrote them. So in these cases, the people who comment is people who really discover. And this Angeline, for example, she's a very young woman who just discovered. She's the one who Jorge Negrete led me to, Pedro Infante, and she was so fascinated that she even opened an Instagram account where she dresses up like an actress of the epoch, and she's researching, and she's really serious about it, researching dates. And so it was amazing to find all this universe, you know, of audiences. But no, they were really passionate about it. But maybe, well, in Argentina and in Uruguay, they were not so passionate about Mexican films. They had this contrast, no? I could see that they, even to remember, what I discovered was that, well, how memory works. I think this is also, I could do another completely different talk about memory, because there are things that are openly, by all means, good to remember, but there are others that are not. So Cantinflas, for example, in many of them, I could see in Uruguay that it was all, for all accepted to like Cantinflas, but not other kind of movies. So in a long interview, on the third interview, they could start telling, oh no, I saw this another one and I really like it. But at the first, it was not for everybody accepted, no? That it was good to be seen, no, or to like. So I think that, well, this is George starting. I'm sure that with time we'll be able to get to see different degrees of attachment, no? But it's amazing, this idea of communion that Carlos Monsiváis has pointed at, communion between, well, not only Carlos Monsiváis, Silvia Oroz also talks about this strong bond between films and audiences that you don't see nowadays with this kind of movies, with this peripheral, no, productions, that this strong bond. And even, well, I have studied other periods of, for example, Mexican film production, and the relationship with the audiences, it was never again the same. This idea of this strong bond, this idea of a complete communion and recognition. Yes, I think that is one of the main subjects to think, well, what happened? Ooh. Yes.
Thank you so much. I think we have to move on for
Okay.
more program points before lunch.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Feel free to make some noise and get up and move around when we sort of transfer to the next point.
Yes.
No demasiado mal.
Pero la verdad es que me encantó al final.
Se abre un universo.
Very much. And it's wonderful to follow Anna's wonderful keynote. So it's great, and it's great to be here. Thanks for the HoMER organizers for accommodating us, and to Daniela for encouraging this as well. We're really delighted to be able to share the work. And it's part of the Cinema Memory and the Digital Archive project, which finished in June. It was a 3-year project that was led by Richard Rushton at Lancaster University, and was a collaboration with Annette Kuhn at Queen Mary and myself. And we had the end of project conference in April and showcased these creative works, which were created in response to the archive then, and Daniela encouraged us to come here, which is great. And the project focuses on the archive that was created as part of Annette Kuhn's pioneering research that was conducted in the 1990s around cinema memory in 1930s Britain. So we thought for this project, we really wanted to have people engage with the archive in as many ways as possible. So we created 4 artist residencies, and the idea was for people to physically come into the archive, because in addition to nearly 200 hours of interviews, there are also there's a collection of cinema memorabilia. So we wanted people to physically engage with the archive and be inspired by that. But because of the pandemic, most of it was conducted, the residencies were conducted virtually using digital files. Louise came into Lancaster and came into the archive, but I don't want to spend too much time introducing this, because I want to leave time for questions with the artists at the end. But I will introduce the 3 artists now, and we will just move from one presentation to the next. We have a short story and then a sound piece, and we'll finish with a film. There's also a film. Our 4th artist couldn't be here with us today, is Katie Grant. Her film will be screening in Classroom T at 3:45, from 3:45 to 4:15, so during the coffee break. So please have a look at that. That's on Cinema Organist, and is a great video essay. But so our first presenter is Louise Welsh, who is an author and professor of creative writing at the University of Glasgow. And she's written a short story in response to the Cinema La Scala on Sauchiehall Street in Glasgow, which comes up in a number of our interviews. And she's a prolific writer of short stories, novels, even opera. I would love to see an opera on cinema memory. That would be great. But yeah, she's written a number of novels, including Cutting Room, which was your first novel, and her most recent novel is Second Cut, which is a sequel to The Cutting Room, a wonderful book. Our next presenter will be Liz Green, who is a sound artist and senior visiting research fellow at the University of Reading. She's created a sound work responding to memories about Judy Garland that have kind of surfaced in the archive. And Liz just recently won awards. She's also, in addition to doing sound work, she's the creator of video essays, and she won awards recently at the British Association of Film and Television Studies for her essay, The Elephant Man Sound, and just the other day won an award for the same work at the Screen Conference as well. And then finally, we'll finish with Marissa Keating, who is an artist and filmmaker based in Glasgow, and she's created a piece about one of our only living participants from the original project, Tom McGoran, who really wanted to be here today. He's now 95. But yeah, unfortunately, he couldn't make it. And of course, we were also hoping that Annette could make it, but she had prior engagements in Germany. But Marissa, in addition to being a filmmaker, she's also a producer, and also works regularly as a photo editor for The Guardian, for Save the Children, and she's worked extensively with archives. So really, responded to it in the material in an interesting way. So without further ado, I will give you Louise's short story. Thank you for coming.
It's very strange to be before you and behind myself. I'm not sure that I like it, but that'll be all right. That'll be okay. Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you also for getting me involved in this project and for the initial invitation to engage with the archive. And thank you to the HoMER Network for inviting me all the way to Rome from Glasgow, where it is still raining. I enjoyed the keynote so much, and I enjoyed very much the intersections that I could see between our own world in Scotland and the cinema that you were describing in Mexico, and that love of the cinema, the love of seeing yourself on screen, but also the love of seeing somewhere else, and the exotic and the dream world that comes down. And when I engaged with this archive, I felt that I was engaging very much with the people who had been recorded and who had given their memories. I felt I was also engaging with my grandparents and the people of their generation that I knew and who now are no longer here, but who had a love-hate affair with America. America was the country of dreams, and it was also a place of excess, flash, not that they were unflashy themselves, but there was and also political differences as well. So it's always this push-pull between that cinema of the 30s that they would watch, the dreams and the reality, the escapism. And I also felt that I was engaging with my younger self, because before I was a writer and worked at the University of Glasgow. In the 1990s, I was an usherette in one of the oldest Art Deco cinemas in Europe, which happened to be in Glasgow, and which is now, you guessed it, a pub. And so, so this works with time, it works with memory. And I should say, when I engaged with the archive, I didn't listen to the recordings, I looked at the texts, and I heard the voices in my head rather than in my ear, which is a strange thing. So I have no slides, I just have a big me. But I want you can close your eyes even, you can go to sleep, it's fine, because this is a land of dreams. But I'm going to take you from Rome, where the colours are bright and beautiful and the sun is shining, to Glasgow in the 1930s. I'm so sorry. It is late on an autumn afternoon, a Glasgow day of low cloud and stinging rain, of puddle water swelling in blocked stanks. Light is sucked from offices and schoolrooms, from ruined kitchens, factories, and not yet quiet shipyards. Shadows reach across Carnegie Library men's reading rooms, where newspaper pages turn, no men wanted. It is all about the light, the lack as day slips into night. In La Scala, Sauchiehall Street, an usherette guides the shadow of a man towards a pair of eyes bigger than a subway tunnel. A tear slips down silvered skin that never felt the slap of winter. That same tear has run down that same cheek 30 times this week. The usherette knows the ending will not be tip-tappity happy and upwards, downwards writhing jig of frantic glee. Beneath her feet, black carpet beetles flee, the torch beams trail. The man slides into red velvet couched in black. The usherette kills the light, retraces her steps, climbs the aisle. She stands by the door, cradles her torch like a weapon, a gangster's gun, tough man's kosh. Hollywood is beautiful. A white sign upon a hill, movie studios and swimming pools, tramps who make it lucky. A car is speeding down a long straight road, asphalt and palm trees, untroubled skies. The driver wears a black Homburg. His smile is no smile at all. He has been a reporter and a rich cad, a cowboy with no time for Apaches, a knight in tight armor, and a Moor type with love. Now he is a detective on the trail. Same face, different hat, narrowed eyes and smart chat. The scene cuts to an electric, brilliant dance floor, black musicians making big noise music, a staircase with the sleep swoop of the La Scala foyer. It makes the usherette dizzy. Life is a movie within a movie, an Art Deco dream that denies calloused hands and chapped lips, the empty coal bunker in the kitchen, the tram ride home. The detective walks towards a lameed blonde. Her hair is fluffed with curls, studded with sparkles. She rests her cigarette in an ashtray, raises her cocktail to her lips, her eyes to his, her cheeks dimple. He strikes a match, lights a lucky strike, does not remove his hat. Cigarette smoke drifts across the screen, merges with the shelves of smoke that hang reluctant ectoplasm above the audience's heads. The barrier between this world and the next is thin and mascara. The world beyond the screen a strip of cellulite away. The trumpeters raise their trumpets, trombones slide, a new woman emerges from behind a curtain. Her hair is loose, her gown black, her lips glossy. She tosses her head, thrusts a long leg through the slit in her skirt, and starts to sing. The blonde inserts a fresh cigarette between pursed lips, and a dark man at the next table meets her eyes. The usherette has seen it all before, seen it 100 times this week, knows all the hop steps and pivots, knows who will stop a bullet. Some nights she pushes the kitchen table against the bed recess, turns up the radio, and waltzes across the lino with a wee brer. He's too young to know she likes to lead, gives him the girl's part. She wants to Lindy hop, but her mother objects. Neighbours bang the ceiling. A silhouette interrupts the screen as the shadow of a man gets to his feet, crosses the aisle and takes another seat. The usherette keeps her eyes on him, and right enough, the girl he sat beside rises and hurries away. The usherette would like to take her torch and shine it in the seat-shifting bastard's eyes, make him squirm like a gangster beneath a naked bulb. But she's been warned before, and though there are cinemas galore, one on every corner, she likes this place. The usherette slips from the auditorium, tells a bellboy to fetch the doorman. When she returns, the scene has changed. The singer wears a wide lapelled coat, a jaunty hat. She and the detective are circled by mirrors in the booth of a lounge bar. The camera splits between their reflections, their gauzy faces and snappy lines. There is old business between them, not yet done. The woman discards her hat, runs her fingers through her hair, sleek and shiny as a wet-nosed spaniel. The usherette touches her own hair. She doesn't like the singer, knows she's full of guile, but she would like her hair, her wide lapelled coat, her style. The usherette can see herself catching the tram home in that outfit, hair curled, waist cinched, the feather of the jaunty hat nodding. Music rises, chords swell, darkening the mood, a storm threatening. Somewhere near the back row, a man is snoring, unaware of women's fashions and weather warnings. The singer grips the detective's hand and makes a promise the usherette knows she will not keep. Dust and tobacco smoke are caught in the beam of light that stretches from the projection booth to the screen. The detective and the singer are dust and smoke too. The woman takes out her compact and regards her face. The camera closes in on her eyes, or their reflection, it's uncertain which. They fill the screen irises wide. Beyond the cinema's realms, the usherette has never been so close to another face. It is far away, across the darkness of the auditorium, across the Atlantic, so close she can see the brush of down on the singer's cheek. The detective has a scar on his top lip. It saves him from looking too soft. The usherette's big brother has one too, says he got it in a fight. Her cousin says he fell face first into his pint, and it is true, her brother's scar is curved like the rim of a glass. The usherette squints, trying to see if the detective's scar forms the same half moon, but he is telling the singer she is nothing but a silly child. He's about to grab her arm and shake her. A baby is crying. Its mother rises and rocks the shawled child up and down the aisle, her attention on the screen. Someone will die soon. The usherette knows who, knows where they went wrong too. The detective and the blonde are alone in the blonde's bedroom. He's worked out who the killer is. The blonde fingers the revolver in her pocket, shows her teeth, draws the detective into an embrace, their mouths lock as if they're sucking oxygen from each other's lungs. He pushes her away and she falls backwards onto the bed, her hips pointing in his direction. He sees the outline of her gun and dares her to go ahead and shoot. The blonde gets to her feet. Her smile is strange. The usherette glances up at the projection booth, catches a glimpse of the projectionist, ready for the reel to end. She moves to the auditorium doors, steadies herself with a sudden blast of light. A shot rings out. The baby stops crying. The usherette does not bother to watch the woman crumple and die again. The detective catch her before she hits the floor, hold her limp in his arms, recite the same lines as before and before, matinees and evenings, evenings and matinees. The usherette prefers monster movies. Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, The Mummy, King Kong. She has strange dreams about Dr. Fu Manchu. Her wee Brer likes the westerns, says he's going to be a cowboy one day, drive cattle across wide open spaces, sleep beneath broad and starry skies, tenement streets and narrow canyons he needs to escape. Big Brother's into gangsters, models himself on Edward G. and Jimmy C., worries her mother no end. The credits are rolling. Bellboys pull the doors wide, cold air rushes in. Some people gather their hats and coats, babies and toddlers and message bags. Others stay slumped in their seats, ready to go round again. And after a while, the auditorium doors swing closed. Titles roll. The story recommences: asphalt and palm trees, silvered skin and glossy hair, trumpeters blowing horn, a detective with narrowed eyes, a blonde and a brunette, and a bullet that knows its target. The usherette leans against the wall. A man slides into the dark. She clicks her torch, lights the way to a red velvet seat couched in black, kills the light, retraces the way back. 6 years later, the usherette and projectionist race along a soggy Hall Street stripped of lights, catch the last subway to make it through before a bomb strikes. In Cloud Bank, blacked out streets are a fire show of splintering tenements, people felled without finesse, districts rubbled, peace and war toppled into the Kelvin, windows shattered in homes and offices, the university and art gallery. Bombs fall on Sandy Road and Hayburn Street, Dumbarton Road and Peel Street, on Tradeston and Drumchapel, Maryhill and Shield Hall, the Brunelaw and Dalmuir Basin, Prince's Dock and Old Kilpatrick, Knightswood and Drumway, Lanefield and Fintry, on and on. The row of place names is less than the row of the dead. Later, the lights return, and later still new buildings rise. La Scala's auditorium is cut into portions, 3 separate screens. There are no more bellboys, no more Saturday morning kids screenings, no more doormen, nobody wears a hat. Disaster movies and disco, high school cheesecake horror, and journeys through starry galaxies. Even the monsters change. Gangsters persist. So does love and horror and dancing, and cowboys smoking cheroots, horses' hooves raising billows of dust as they gallop across sandy wastelands. But even when they save the girl and win the day, they can't rescue La Scala. Multiplexes and home entertainment slam shut its doors, and there are no more usherettes. But for now, she stands by the auditorium door, watching the story play out again. She touches her hair and imagines herself in a jaunty hat decorated with a feather, a coat cinched tight at the waist. The shadow of a man crosses the screen and a woman hurries away. The usherette tells the bellboy to fetch the doorman, a baby cries, and the singer backchats the detective, who says, "Sure, baby, sure." And while the picture plays, everything is sure. Bad weather kept at bay, every movement certain. Death, a clean and choreographed dance, played out 6 times a day. Thank you.
Okay, and I need to put the word document up as well. So this one here, and then do you wanna put it up? Yeah, and then is there a way to press record? Thank you so much for the invite to come and to present this work. It was a real honor to work with the archive, and thanks in particular to Daniela for extending the invitation. I'm working on 2 projects at the moment. One is about the universe of kind of the Wizard of Oz, so that's why I went in and started looking for Judy Garland here. But the other project I'm working on is about eyebrows, and it started, I live in Liverpool, and Maria Felix was the inspiration for the whole project. We started asking.
This is tape T95/15, and I'm Valentina Bold.
So we started kind of asking, how does Maria Felix use her eyebrows, and what does it say to us about Liverpool, a city that is known for its eyebrow? It has a scouse brow. Scouse is a term for people who live in Liverpool. So there's lovely connections. I really, really enjoyed the keynote. It was really powerful. So for this project, I was asked to listen to stuff in the archive and come up with something. And I didn't quite know how to start, because actually it's vast. It's a vast archive. But I thought, okay, I will do something related to the Wizard of Oz. And I went in and looked at the Wizard of Oz stuff, and then thought, okay, there's interesting stuff here about Judy Garland. So that's what the project is. So I didn't put anything into this project apart from what's in the archives. There's no other sound elements. So most of my job is really cleaning up the sound. The sound was recorded by the interviewer Valentina Bold in the 90s, and she was a researcher and not a sound recordist. So some of the sound recording is a little bit tricky to hear. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to understand and hear it properly. But basically, as I was working with the project, I was almost as influenced by Valentina Bold than the interviewees. I ended up having a bit of a crush on Valentina Bold by the end of it. So that's kind of the framing or the structure of what I was doing. So hopefully I can hit play and everything will work okay.
This is tape T95/15, and I'm Valentina Bold. The date today is the 3rd of March 1995, and I'm about to go and talk with the clients of Hamilton Hill Day Centre about their experiences of going to the cinema in the 1930s. And I'll be talking to Tom Walsh at his home in Cambuslang, Glasgow, to Dr. Tony Patterson of Victoria Crescent Road, Glasgow, to Mr. and Mrs. Rivers of Needham Market, Mr. Venice of Pinner, Mr. Godwold of Stowmarket, Suffolk, to Mrs. Scowen of Harrow, Mrs. Irene Letchard of Harrow, Tessa Amelin in Manchester, Molly Stevenson and Margaret Young of Cambuslang, Glasgow, to Mrs. Gloria Gooch of Bradwell near Great Yarmouth, Mr. Wilde of Burnmore Road, Bolton, Mrs. Mary McCusker of Dundasville Court, Cowcaddens, Glasgow, Doreen Lyle of Lowestoft, people at Heathlands Residential Home, to Mrs. Sheila McWhinney, Gwen and Fred Kernick, brother and sister of Harrow, Middlesex, Douglas Rendell of Altrincham, Manchester, Arthur Orrell of Bolton, who are meeting at the Tourist Information Centre in Manchester, Mrs. P. Bennett of the Heartsease Estate in Norwich, This is the 30th of May 1995 and I'm Valentina Bold, still choked up with the cold. I'm about to interview Lois Bassnett and Herbert Partington of West Houghton, Greater Manchester, about their memories of going to the cinema in the 1930s for the second time.
Right, so if I could ask you to maybe click this on while we're talking, that would be great, and it should help both of us as well. Aye, it's quite a good.
Anywhere at all.
Just anywhere, aye.
Right.
Anywhere that feels comfortable. I know, so that's the idea.
They use these kind of things and you see them in the telly clipped on, don't you?
They're very good actually. They give really good, because the one I had before, you get a lot of background noise as well.
Aye.
Just picks up voices.
Very good, very good.
And the nice thing about it as well is that I can control the level from the machine. So if it doesn't seem to be, if your voice is coming over a bit faint, I can turn it up.
You can turn it up, aye. Do you want a trial? Do you want me to say 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yeah, just say something.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A big fat hen.
That's probably about right.
Right.
You pull over that wee stool and you can lay it on it. Aye, I'll do that.
Good idea.
Table towards you behind you. That's lovely. Right, I think that's a slight that minor technical hitch. But I'm working at the university and it's a 2-year project. So we're talking to folk in Glasgow and we're also going to be going down south and talking to folk in Manchester and in London. And the idea is to get some sort of idea about what it was like to go in the pictures from all these different places. So hopefully there'll be things in common and differences as well. Were there any stars that were particularly popular? Oh, I mean, you mentioned Diana Durban.
Oh, yes. Well, different age
Fred and
groups.
Ginger. Fred and Ginger.
And
Marlene Dietrich, Charles Boyer, Joan Crawford, Greta Garbo, my goodness. But I think it was very wide.
yes,
Very,
well,
very
there's Robert
wide.
Young and
Robert Montgomery,
Clark Gable.
Gary Cooper.
Clark Gable. Was
Yes, Clark Gable. That goes back to the
No,
mid
I was
30s.
only a child, you see, so Diana Durban, and Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland. Oh, Mickey Rooney was my heartthrob when I was a child.
Wasn't it? That was just before the war.
Yes, that's right.
And the Mickey
Yeah,
Rooney
yeah.
sort of hit it during the war.
I wasn't really interested in that sort of film.
Right. So what sort of films was it that you liked yourself?
We saw anything that came. See what I mean? Can't get a word in. I'm sorry.
Well, maybe you could tell us what films you liked.
Train of thought's been disturbed now.
Because you mentioned Shirley Temple.
Well, she wasn't the only one I went to see, although I was very entertained.
There's one
by
actually
those
before
films.
Shirley Temple
Yeah.
that was very good, but made not Judy Garland,
No, wait a minute.
Jane Withers.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I'm still a very keen cinema goer. I'm a bit disappointed with the number of good films there are about now. There's too much violence, too much explicit sex. I mean, they were wonderful films, and they didn't have to show all these sex scenes. They were brilliant without it. I mean, gosh, German and Russian films still, I think, even that period, still have something to teach filmmakers of today. They do. Would you like some more?
I'd love some. It's delicious.
Just switch it off.
Okay.
I mean, I think the greatest musical artist is Judy Garland. I mean, she has that, genius about her.
I never liked Judy Garland.
And Wizard of Oz, I thought was wonderful. That was just before the war, I think.
You won't believe this, I've never seen The Wizard of Oz. You know the way you get a block about there's something you automatically, first place, I always thought Judy Garland was ugly and I didn't like ugly women in pictures. Although she's good at putting over this thing.
Oh, she's talented.
She's talented, but I could never throw her when you had Ginger Rogers and Alice Faye and the more, shall we say, glamorous looking bits of stuff. Poor Judy was a bit plain. And the idea of it was a kind of fairy story, the Wizard of Oz.
Ah, it was a child's
And I made up my mind I hadn't seen it, and I haven't seen it yet. I see wee bits of it on the telly. Oh, by the way,
I never was really fond of Judy Garland. No, I don't know. I don't know her films, like the... I just really wasn't very fond of Judy Garland. I think she'd be a little bit older than me, not much. So I didn't like her films, but I liked her singing. You know, some of the songs she sang, You Made Me Love You, and Dear Mr. Gable, because I like Clark Gable, yeah. But as for the films, I wasn't really much. I wanted older people in films, you know, like I was that way myself. I was older than I was.
I like the later musicals with Judy Garland and I forget his name now. She used to star with him. Mickey Rooney used to star with him, and we always saw all the musicals. They were wonderful. Well, they were a lot of hocus pocus, but you know, that's what we wanted. We didn't want anything deep or dramatic. We wanted entertainment. And I think they've somehow forgotten that.
Last week in the Glasgow Herald there was a letter in, and I was thinking of you because I just made contact with you. And somebody was pointing out that there was an English myth that the famous Glasgow Empire, you don't know, the music hall of yesteryear, the Glasgow Empire was supposed to be the graveyard for English comedians. You know, there's a joke told about English comedians going up here and dying a death. And the writer, whoever it was this was a riposte to somebody had written in about this. And the writer was pointing out that the American stars didn't die a death. They quoted Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, Sophie Tucker, to mention three. They all came up here and they didn't die any deaths. They were most enthusiastically received. So you see, it's not all true. You know, the Glasgow Empire was only unkind to those who deserve to be unkind.
Yeah. Did you have other favourites among the stars of the musicals?
Well, I suppose Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire was the best, but Judy Garland did come in later, really, and Diana Durbin.
I think I've got one from
Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland. And
of course, we loved the Diana Durbin, Judy Garland.
That's what
I adore them.
I mean, did you have any particularly favourite types of films? I mean, we've talked a bit about musicals there, and
I loved the musicals, most of them, and the romances. I mean, the Garbo and Norma Shearer and Judy Garland, people like that. They were mostly musical.
I think Judy Garland was a great singer.
Judy Garland, yeah.
Yeah, she's a good singer. She wasn't in the silent, but just Judy.
Oh, A Star Is Born, Janet Gaynor, goodness yes. That's the only one I saw of that lot.
I'm just trying to think how many of those I saw, and in actual fact, I don't think I saw any of them. I remember them, funnily enough. I remember this Star Is Born, because that was made later with Judy Garland, the more modern. And this I can remember Stella Dallas. These aren't the 30s, are they?
They are, yes.
Are they? So long ago.
The Star Is Born. Judy Garland made the second version of it.
Right. That's the Judy Garland one's the one I remember. I don't think I've seen that
but
one.
I've seen this one, yeah. That was the better of the two, really. For acting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one of the things that I remember was Little Nellie Kelly with Judy Garland. I didn't see it, but I remember coming in that day and this lesson had been at the trade show. Oh, it was Little Nellie Kelly. And she started singing the song. Oh, it was lovely. So Little Nellie Kelly was it was important.
You didn't see a coloured film. I think the first coloured film I saw was Judy Garland in The Wizard of Oz, and I was quite grown up then. And then that was only part colour, not the way that we recognise it now.
Really, only from about 1935 that one could remember what was around, what films one was seeing, and of course at that time I think did Wizard of Oz come out in 1935?
Something like that.
I think
yeah.
the cinema was, mainly American, of course, was beginning to find its feet.
The Wizard of Oz was made in 1939.
I took him to see The Wizard of Oz once, and I had to bring him home. He gets migraine, and there was a lot of noise in it, and you've got such a headache. I had to bring her home from that.
When stars were young, when Hollywood were young, Judy Garland was one. Jane Willis was another. They were all young in Hollywood,
Well, you'd be about 5 of them. Shirley
Shirley
Temple
Temple
um,
there.
was one.
They
Shirley
were
Temple.
in Hollywood when I was very young.
Aye. She's Mrs. Black now.
A lot of child stars. Aye, Judy Garland.
Yes, well, she's good.
Diana Durbin. She was an operatic thing. But she sang a language with Judy Garland when I was very young.
Really?
See, I dare say they made them better as time went on. They must have done, but we thought them they were wonderful then. Judy Garland. Now, when did she was when she was a youngster? What time would that been?
That must have been late 30s.
Yes, must have
early
been.
40s.
Yes.
Yeah. Were there other child stars apart from Shirley Temple? Or?
Well, Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney were the stars of the Andy Hardy series. They come up through that, and you'd have went anywhere to see, it, Andy growing up. And of course he was always doing silly things, you see, and then he'd go to him and ask advice after he'd done the thing, and the father was a judge, you see, and he was very much older than his son, and they were great. And Judy was always, hanging on. She was the plain hanger-on, and he always fancied this dolly bird, with wee curls and that. Oh, it was, they were really great. And you could, they were realistic. They were real to you. They were really real to you.
There's a picture here of Judy Garland when she was 13. One of Bertram Goldwyn's youngest players. I can't honestly say I can remember seeing her when she was that age. I remember her as she got older.
Just the same as Judy Garland. I mean, they were all ages with us at the time.
Oh yes, they should all go. Diana Durbin, all those songs. Those ones. Andy Hardy films.
Judy Garland.
Yes.
She was another.
And the early Judy Garlands with the Diana Durbin. And what was that one? 101 Men, was it?
100 Men and a Girl.
100 Men and a Girl,
that's right, yes.
There's three smart girls.
That's right.
Yes.
And 3 smart girls grow up.
Yeah.
That's right, yes. That was Diana Durbin, wasn't it? And 2 other people who sunk without trace.
Did you like her? I mean,
Oh, I did, yes.
Diana
I used to
Durbin.
like her. She had a nice voice. I think it was burnt out in the end, She was really very young and doing very fine songs, but I should imagine from the filming she had to do it until her voice was roughened.
No, she started off at the same time as Judy Garland, didn't
Yes,
she?
well they were quite different.
Quite different.
I mean, they were both good
types of-
singers,
yes,
but Judy
but-
Garland was on the jazz side, and she could really pick a song, couldn't she? She was marvellous.
But you see, a lot of these people, I mean, Judy Garland was really exploited by the studios, wasn't she? Really, it's very sad, really. Same as Marilyn Monroe, really. They were.
I mean, were you aware of that at the time?
Not really.
No.
No, I don't.
Because you see, the most of
Well, the picture girl would say Mary used to have that.
Well, yes, but I mean, it was all sanitised there, wasn't it? Really, I mean, it was all just publicity, wasn't it? Really? I mean, Judy Garland would, I can remember saying, she loved to go to the soda fountain for malted milk. Well, I don't suppose she was allowed a malted milk because she had a sort of weight problem, same as I had, So that, I mean, apparently what she actually was expected to dance for about 14 hours a day on a lettuce leaf. Well, I don't wonder she had to, in the end, take something to get her weight down and
something to wake her up.
because I remember seeing her on, I think it was a television thing of her when she was in town over here and she was enormous. And then it wasn't long after that she was in A Star Is Born, and she was as thin as a rake. Because I used to think, gosh, I wish I knew how you got your weight down like that. Well, apparently it was just drugs,
How the stars keep those figures and how they got them in the picture. Judy Garland, they're very young. Dietrich. Tomato juice, water and cigarettes. That's how you keep your figure.
you live long enough to
Yes.
enjoy it.
Are you single?
I'm married.
Oh, you're married? Oh. Children?
Not yet, no.
No. How long have you been married?
Just a couple of years. 2 years.
Oh,
yeah.
you're young. How old are you?
I'm 32.
Oh, you don't look it. Well, I suppose with you
thanks.
being slim, you look younger. How old do you think I am? I'll tell you, but have a guess.
I'm not very good, but
no. But go on, have a try. You don't know anybody around here, and you'll be leaving here, so I'm not bothered.
I would say sort of mid to late 60s, something like that.
Mid to late 60s. I'm 77.
Really?
Yeah, honest.
Well, that does surprise me.
I'll be 78 next month. I've never looked my age. Never.
You've got a very fresh face. I think.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I'm surprised, you know.
Yeah, I'm 77. Yeah. Can't believe it myself. I'm not frightened of growing old because I keep active. I do the exercises. We have coach trips to the different places, St Anne's, Blackpool, Morecambe. There's a trip to Morecambe tomorrow, but I'm not going. Don't want to. I've been there umpteen times.
Was it Deanna Durbin or Judy Garland who was another child star? One or other.
Was she a big fan of Deanna Durbin then?
Not really, she liked her.
Yeah.
She liked it. But we both liked Deanna Durbin better than Judy Garland, really.
Oh. What was it about her that made her that bit more special?
Well, she was Canadian. That was the reason why. She was a Canadian, you see, so we knew that.
That's Judy Garland. Of course, Deanna Durbin was one that I was keen on because yeah, funny. Yeah, she is, because she was the same age as me, and we both sang. And of course, I sang all the songs she sang. As her films came out, I got the songs and sang them. Where's Deanna?
100 Men and a Girl.
She's still kicking her heels somewhere in France and doesn't allow anybody to see her. You know, she's completely cut herself off, and she was wise to do it. I mean, look at Judy Garland.
She must have been very young when she retired.
Yes, in her 20s.
In her 20s.
I mean, her famous period was from the time she was 14
Yes.
until she was 20, I suppose.
Yeah.
And she wasn't a bit much interest after that. Fascinating, the way she just walked out of the film industry and gave it all up. She was probably a lot cleverer than Judy Garland to do that. But she was a delightful girl.
Now, Judy Garland had a stressful time. They made her do things that she didn't want to do, and she ended up taking drugs, and in the end it killed her.
The money spinners were Broadway Melody and those things that made people cheerful. And I mean the things that, what's her name, Julie Garden, were cheerful, cheerful things. And she was such a cheerful person. In her mind, it seemed extraordinary that she came to such a poor end with someone who so happy in her films.
It's interesting when you say about Deanna Durbin. She had quite a short career, didn't she?
Yes.
She didn't make that many films.
And she married young.
Yeah.
Yeah. Better that way, you remember them when they're good.
Yes.
Rather than Judy Garland, who was making appearances when she shouldn't have done. And she's not the only one. Did you ever see Tony Bennett in one of his reappearances?
Yes.
It's embarrassing.
And Joan and Judy Garland. But, you know, they couldn't do what they wanted, you know, that all them lot at the studio. I mean, that Louis B. Mayer, I mean, he was Lord. I mean, if they say they fell for a baby, they weren't allowed to have it, you know, they had to have an abortion. It's dreadful, really, isn't it?
Need a little microphone between us.
Yeah.
It really is very good, that, and I was amazed when I tried it. It's just as good as these big bulky ones.
Yeah.
Because Mo was making them better and better.
What's the word?
Improving.
Well, we'll be brave today and hear a wee bit of it.
Oh, no, I don't want to. I've heard her voice.
Oh, I know, so have I.
Amazed.
I just thought we might be a wee bit brave.
Yeah, not at all. We've both got lovely voices. Very clear.
Well, let's hear just a wee bit then.
Oh, they're not terribly Glasgow.
Yeah.
The only thing is that this machine that I've got hasn't got a playback on it.
Oh, it hasn't. Oh, well, then, Margaret,
much
you're
more
lucky.
modern, whatever you call it.
Yeah,
But I have got a pair of headphones so you can hear it.
No, it's okay. No, I don't want
Uh-huh.
Right.
Oh, I wouldn't mind hearing a wee bit of it.
I'm thinking actually I should maybe go for the train.
Well, I tell you what, did it help to get the subway?
The subways are off.
Oh, the
because of
subways
rain.
are off?
Yeah.
Because John said you'd come in right in about 5-10 minutes.
Right.
What time do trains go?
What's he got to find out? Good all right, isn't it, from Glasgow down here?
Yes, it is.
Deanna Durbin, now she was nice. She sang nice, didn't she? She was very nice. And, of course, Judy Garland, how old would she be? Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, oh yes, yes. They were good. They did spectacular musicals in that time.
Yes. 409, 510.
Yes. You really want to make for the 5:10?
5:10?
Yes.
Yes.
You really want to make for the 5. And to do that, you really want to leave here.
How do you get bus from here?
Just
Walk
from the
into
main street.
Galston? Yes, walk into Galston.
Oh, you go?
Yeah.
You couldn't run her through, could
I
you?
could run you through to Galston.
Or run you through to the station, could
Because you really, to get that 5:10, you really want to leave here
I
very
I'll
soon.
give you a cup of tea.
Right.
Give you a
You
cup
won't
of tea.
have time for a cup of tea if you
Well,
want the
could you
5:10.
take her
Well, yes, I could take it through to Galston.
or to the station?
Yeah, I'll take it through to Yarmouth.
That would be very kind actually, if you don't mind. I mean, I don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, getting buses.
All right.
Well, I would strongly advise you
Well,
to
get the
leave
car
here.
out
I would
and put the
strongly
shoes on.
advise you to leave here. Well, any
10
minute.
past 10? No, not for 10 past
You only
5.
want to leave here by 10 to 5 to get that.
That's 10, 25 right to 4.
Oh, 5 to
Oh,
go down.
you
Sorry,
go.
There's one. Well, you've got about another hour.
Yeah. There is actually one at 4:10 that I could get. If that.
Would you like to get that one?
That would probably suit me because
Yes.
then I can get back into.
Well, in that case, then you.
Nearly need to go.
Yes, you need to go.
Well, you know, you've got to
You
get-
need to go. I'll
Don't
get
know
my
what.
coat.
Take along the bag.
Can I give you a hand in clearing these away? Or?
No such thing.
I'm glad to be company. No, it's been great.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll see you again. Probably not actually, no.
I understand.
Yeah.
It's been very nice to have you.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, as I say, and
I hope I haven't spoken a lot of rubbish.
no, far from it, far from it.
I'll show you my tapestry.
That would
before
be great,
I go.
yes. Certainly talked about a lot today, from the pictures to,
Whiskey.
whiskey, I suppose. So I mean, thanks very much for letting me come and
Well,
you
that's
know
all right, yes.
sharing your memories with me, because that's been really useful for me.
Just one thing before you go. Remember that all the lies we tell you weren't true.
Right.
Don't tell lies.
All told lies. I've got these forms that the university asked us to sign, get people to sign, basically so that you can't sue us for
Yeah,
you know,
sure. Yeah.
defamation of character or
Right,
anything.
right.
God heavens. It's just really to say that,
Yes,
because they
please.
want to be kept in the university.
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Is everybody so
No,
civil
not
liberties
really
these days?
This is it, yes.
Civil liberties.
This was the third interview I was doing today. I was feeling quite tired, particularly toward the end. We were in the front room of the house, consuming large quantities of apple pie and cream throughout, so it was quite a cosy, intimate atmosphere with a sort of dim light on a winter's afternoon. This interview with Mrs. Gooch was conducted in the front room rather than the kitchen, which was very cosy. There was a roaring fire. It's somewhat more chilly today than it was in the last interview. And The tea was all set out with biscuits, and I've been given biscuits to have on the train as well. And this is certainly an interview which uses a lot of cinematic regression, I think. Mrs. Gooch very much re-entering the past. The interviewer offered quite a few personal opinions towards the end, and I think as one gets to know an informant better, it becomes really essential to offer some personal opinions. Otherwise, you're not going to get beyond the market researcher. Objectivity is all very well, but at some stage you have to give a certain amount of exchange of views. Otherwise, the person is left feeling as if you're not really listening to them very deeply. So the offering of personal comments becomes quite important, certainly in second interviews and in subsequent interviews, which should be, I think, and are more conversational than the question-answer format of the first interviews. And the field notes. So, at this point in the course of the field, I'm going to go home tonight, relax and get ready for an early start for Glasgow tomorrow.
Yeah, just to say thanks again so much to Nat Janela for inviting us. It's very special to share a film of this subject with you guys. I think it's a really nice resident sort of audience. Tom was an amazing character, the guy who's in the film. Sarah Neely brought him to my attention, and it's only the tiniest story of his many, many, many stories he's got. And I really recommend, not being paid to say this, but the Lancaster Archives have got a really incredible storage. Again, Valentina Bold was the interviewer. Can't recommend enough. This is really just looking, when I started filming him, he brought out lots of drawings of cinemas that he had made. There were cinemas on every street corner in Glasgow during that sort of the 30s and 40s. So the focus is a bit on that. And it's just a 10-minute film, so it's a tiny slice, but there are no captions. I'm really sorry, but I hope you can understand. I'm not sure he'd approve of our projecting as a projectionist right now, but we've actually screened it already on his living room wall, so I think he'll be all right. Ooh, is it this one?
This is the 30th of November 1994, tape T94/12. I'm Valentina Bold, and I'll be talking to Thomas McGoran of Denniston, Glasgow, about his experiences of the cinema and working as a cinema projectionist in the 1930s.
Right then. My remit is to make up a map, a road map of the cinemas in the city centre. Not today's cinemas, but the ones that were here in the halcyon years of the 1930s, 40s and 50s. Somebody once said that there were more cinemas per head of population in Glasgow than there was in any other city in the whole country. That's possibly true because I remember where I lived, which was not very far from here. There was more than a dozen cinemas within easy walking distance of where I lived. This is the road map here, and this shows where the cinemas were. This is Sucky Hall Street, and then straight down Renfield Street, right across to Eglinton Street.
Glasgow was a movie mad city. The cinema life then, it was everything, because there was no other means of entertainment for the uneducated masses. You know, there was theatres in the city, and there was dance halls. Once you grew up a bit, you went to the dancing. The theatres for people that had money, but the cinemas was for the poor people. I mean, going to the cinema was an escapist thing for us, you know. You used to go there and you would carpet away to other worlds. When we come out of the cinemas, if we'd seen a cowboy picture, we'd all be galloping down the road. Hello there, bang bang, shooting. You see? If we'd seen a musical picture, we'd all be singing and dancing. They caught the imagination of the kids, you know, that they actually were living the lives of what they'd seen in the screen.
I was always interested in architecture, so I used to look at the cinema buildings before I went in, and I studied them, and I tried to remember what they looked like, and then even when I was inside the cinema, I couldn't wait for the lights to come up at the interval time so as I could look at the decor inside, the design of the proscenium arch round the screen. But one thing that intrigued me most about the cinemas was, when I looked at the back of the cinema, I could see a small row of windows, and from one of those windows was an intense white light. And that intense white light seemed to widen as it came towards the screen, and the light was dancing all the time. This was because the images on the screen were moving. And I used to think to myself, what makes that white light? Why is it so intense? And I could see heads in the windows, and I would say, I wonder what those guys are doing up there, what it's like to be up there. And I thought to myself, one day I'm going to find out. I'm going to make sure that I find out what goes on up in these projection booths. Little did I know that that was going to come sooner than I thought. One of the wee cows has fallen over. I come in and give them a wee run every day, give them 20 minutes or so, and sometimes I change the locomotives. The two that's on just now, take them off and put another two on, change the wagons, change the coaches, because there's plenty there. I've bought a wee more houses, so I'm going to move my supermarket here. I'm going to move it up here, make the park smaller, and retain this is a car park for the supermarket, so I'll retain that. And there's wee people all over the village. Two guys sitting here having their tea. My elephant. That's my great granddaughter. She came up with that and she left it here. When next time she came up, I says to her, I've got your elephant. And I showed her where it was. And she says, just keep it. So, I've got an elephant now. I left school on a Friday and I started working on Monday. So there was no time wasted. My mum needed the money, so that's what she said, get a job. I didn't know what to do about getting a job, and fortunately she met that colleague in a air raid warden. His name was Alec Craig. He was a nice enough fella. When I went for the interview, I was still wearing short trousers. All the boys in those days wore short trousers. And before I left, the chief operator told me, he says, ask your mum to buy you a pair of long trousers. Don't forget, he says, you're a working man now. You're not a schoolboy any longer. 14. Working man at 14. Well, he taught me a lot about the projection. He says, you'll learn as you go, and so I did. I could operate two projectors, changeovers and everything, without any help at the end of the day. So we did okay. In our projection days, with two projectors, see, right. Number 1 and number 2. On the screen, this projector would have a film magazine capable of showing
roughly 20 minutes. But 1100 feet, the spool would be about so big. Put it on the projector, lace the film through the projector and set it off. Now when that film was running, 20 minutes roughly, you got this one ready with the next reel. That went in place. You'd open the magazine door and see when the film was coming near its end. But it was coming to about a couple of minutes to go. You'd get everything ready, get the light fixed up and ready to start this. Now every film reel had this marker. Roughly 15 seconds before that reel finished, a mark would appear up there, just for a split second, and go away again. When the projectionist saw that mark, he started up this projector.
Right.
And had it running. And then just before this film finally finished, a second mark would appear, again just for a split second. And when the projectionist saw that second mark, there was a device here across the windows, just a bar like this with two bits of metal on it. And you shove it across and block off the light of that one and open up this one which is already playing. So the film was continuous. You needed to be a trained person to see it. But once you saw it, you saw the first mark, if you turned around and waited for a few seconds, you'd see the light changing over in the projection room. You know, that's going from one projector to the other.
Well, I've been interested in drawing ever since I could hold a pencil. I was always drawing in any scrap of paper, just as long as I was drawing something. My dad used to say to me, "What are you going to do in life?" This is before I left school. "What are you going to do in life?" And I thought, "I'm going to be an artist." And he laughed at me. He says, "Do you realise," he says, "you've got to be dead to be a successful artist?" I says, "Well," I says, "we'll wait and see what happens." Now, these are prints that the Glasgow Council made for me, paintings, and they have come out very well. This, again, is most of my paintings. This is children round a watchman's hut. There's been roadworks going on, there's a pile of mud here or something, and the night watchman had a fire going, and it used to be an attraction for the kids to come and sit at night time, and he would tell them stories and all sorts of things that went on. It was great. This is a family scene. Dad's at the window, he's stropping his razor on a strap, getting ready. Sunday morning, going to church, maybe. Kids playing in the back court. This is a painting I dedicated to my mum. This was a painting of the house that I lived in. It was just a room and kitchen, and this was the room. My mum had a sewing machine. That's her sitting down at the sewing machine, and the kids playing about the house while she's working. Nobody ever taught me to draw, but I'll tell you, I think I got it from my mother, because she was very clever. She could do anything art-wise. She used to tell me when I was doing things right and when I was doing them wrong. If she saw me sitting drawing at any time, she'd come across and look and see what I was doing. And she'd say, "You're not doing that right, you're not doing this right, this is how you do it." That way, that helped me along the way as well. So I've always had an eye for detail, and she told me to concentrate on that. She said, "If you want to draw things in detail, make sure you get them right." She said, "Because if you don't, you'll always get the critic who will turn around and say, 'That's not right, that's not the way that was,' you know." So she says, don't give him a chance. The cinema started closing down or becoming bingo halls, and we realised then that, well, our jobs was on the line and we knew what was coming. So I decided to jump before I was pushed, find another job away from my cinemas, and that was more or less the end of my cinema career. It's fallen apart. Listen, I'm afraid to open it because it all fall apart and I won't be able to put it back again. This is called Here and There in a Dear Green Place. Again, it's a story with pictures of all the buildings and the drawings that I've done. I've found out the details, I've researched all the buildings, such as this one. This is at Parkhead Cross, as it was and still is, except there is no tram cars not running now. Firhill Stadium, the railway works at Springburn, they're all there. I was 60 years old when I was made redundant from the railways, and I was advised not to look for another job, that at my age I would have the greatest of difficulties of finding a job. My wife, she came to me, and that box that's sitting up in the corner there, that was my first paint set. My wife gave it to me and she said, there you are, there's a retirement present for you. I says, what is it? So I opened it up and saw a paint brush. She says, you've always wanted to do some painting. She says, well, you've got no excuse now. There you are, get on with it. So I just taught myself to use the oils as well. And well, you see the results of them there. So it's all been good. It's all been good. When I was living with my mum and dad, when they'd moved into a bigger house, me and my brother shared a bedroom, and on the whole wall, painted in cartoons with Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, they were all in it. Mickey Mouse was playing a piano, the dwarfs was all dancing and singing, Pluto the dog was there, everybody was there. Well, she loved it, so she says, that's staying there. One morning she says, I had a dream about that painting last night. She says, I dreamed that I wanted to decorate the room, and she says, and when I put up new wallpaper, they kept coming through it. She says that the cartoon characters all come through the new wallpaper. She says, I couldn't get rid of them. And she says, and I came to you and I said to you, get rid of these cartoons. She said, I want to redecorate the room. And she says, I walked in and I just went, and they all jumped off the wall. I said, oh, that was some dream.
I think we don't want to cut into your lunch, but we do want to give you the chance to ask any questions. So we've got about 5 minutes or so if the artists would like to come up. It was great seeing all of the works together, and as I said, Kate Grant's work will be showing later today. But yeah, they all respond to the collection in different ways. Louise's piece responding really to the space of the cinema and the geography of the city, and Liz's piece, really responding to like the social and spatial dimensions of the interview in really interesting ways that I hadn't thought of before. And then Marissa's piece giving a real glimpse into one of our people's kind of imagination and kind of life with the cinema. So thank you. It's great. They're really special works and really help to bring to life to the archive. But does anyone have any questions? free rein to do and so that whether it was supposed to be based on your
Well, I was approached by Sarah. We've actually worked together in Margaret Tate's, who's a filmmaker in Orkney, in a sort of similar relationship. But I was gathering oral histories and it turned into a short documentary. So I guess she knew also, having done a project like that with her, just to alert me to the project, because also just, I guess, focusing on people and people's stories. So to kind of focus on Tom as a person and what his background is, also as a sort of within the archive, was interesting as much as the archival voice he provided, the history that he provides, because he was such an incredible man. So
I mean, Marissa's was very particular because we were going to meet with Tom just before the pandemic, and so we wanted to kind of keep the conversation going, but he wanted to engage with the project, and Marissa had been doing filming on other projects, and so was able to kind of get in contact with him, and then once things eased, was able to kind of talk to him outside of his flat and
And I think actually then realizing, uncovering the amount of drawings he has, and Sarah went on to commission him to create this map. So that became like a nice focus for the film. There's lots of footage of him doing that, but it's something visual to show, I guess. So yeah, it kind of developed in that way as well, I guess, for the archive. But he was,
But you did have free. We didn't kind of say you have to do that. But
no, and it was totally up to us to interpret it in whatever way. I love archives, and I've worked with them quite a lot as a picture researcher originally back in the 90s, and I used to work in an archive. But so I guess that's always, I think it's really moving, seeing stuff and hearing voices from the past.
But do the others, do you want to talk a bit about kind of what's your way into the archive and how you ended up making
I really enjoyed the materiality of the archive. I enjoyed the actual documents, and there are photographs, and I didn't listen so much to the voices, which surprised me. I thought I would listen to the tapes, but I took from the written word, because I started to hear these voices in my head, which but I think when you go to an archive as a creative artist, sometimes you go with a mission, but you must also go with an open mind. So often you go looking for something and you find something else, but I think going looking for something stops you from panicking, because like anybody else, you have the panic. I have to produce a piece of work. Somebody's kindly asked me to make a piece of work. What am I going to make? Oh no, okay, I'll make this. And I thought I would be going looking for LGBTQ+ images, and I thought perhaps I wouldn't find them in this archive, and then I could write about an absence, because an absence is also a presence. But actually, when I went, I started to, I got very interested in a contributor who was also an usherette. And I just felt this wonderful connection, and her joy came across on the page, and the young woman that she had been and still was, even though she was in her 80s, that young woman was still living inside her. And she talked about the war, that moment of the Clydebank Blitz. And she talked about running along the street with the projectionist. And she said, well, he was a real coward, because we got into the underground and he just kept on saying, what if a bomb lands on the underground? She said, what a coward. Well, I looked it up, and a bomb did land on the underground that night. There was actually a bomb, and these people missed it. But she wasn't, it was like she suddenly, I think when Valentina Bold in your piece, she said that the traveling somehow through the cinema, that was definitely happening in that interview. So it was a wonderful, I just felt these doors opening, and you walk through them.
And Liz, do you want to say something about looking, because it's about Judy Garland, but then so much
Yeah,
more?
so I kind of, sorry, I'm kind of in front of the screen. I kind of went in, because it's so vast, I could have gone in any direction, and I kind of realized that actually that would be my focus. But for most of my time, I was half tempted to work on a project about Valentina Bold. So I had two timelines. And so I had about an hour and a half of material of Valentina Bold and about 2 hours of Judy Garland. And I mean, 28 minutes is long in this heat to listen to this stuff, but 2 hours would have been way too much. So I made a decision based on what I thought Annette and the project would want to just stick to kind of Judy. But I was interested more in the kind of meandering kind of conversations. And I think because I started working on it during the pandemic and I couldn't get home. I'm from Ireland, I'm from Dublin. I live in Liverpool. It's only 30 minutes away by flight. But I couldn't make that journey. So I was thinking about my aging parents, who were a similar age now to the participants then, and I love those conversations of, just kind of trying to give a lift to go to the train station, and just how complicated that conversation becomes because everyone has an opinion on it and everyone gets it wrong. And so those bits stayed in it because of, I think, my connection to my home and my parents and that kind of layering of memories. But yeah, I think this piece will end up being, for me, well, it'll stay as this, but I'll make an audiovisual essay version of it. I've already got a full draft of it, but I just need to finish the subtitles. And the subtitles will be really helpful, I think, because of the sound quality. And also the range of accents. I think it would be really useful to have that. But yeah, it's an incredible resource. So if you're interested in working with archival materials, I really strongly recommend checking out the Cinema Memory website. And you can do a search within the website. So you just type in Judy Garland and all of the mentions of Judy Garland pops up and you get the text and the sound, and it's time-stamped. So you can get through this material, and it's a really well designed website. So I really recommend it if you're interested in exploring this.
Thank you. That's really good. And actually, I think Annette always says the easiest way is if you Google CMDA land, that's what the website comes up. So if you do that website. Are there any other questions?
Well, just to congratulate you, because there's so many possibilities to work with that. If you open up those variety of words. So,
I think I was just so interested to hear you saying that you're working further with it, because these prompts are like conferences. You come and you meet something and you don't know what the next work will be, and it sends you somewhere else. And the journey can be really far from where you started, and it sent me back to pre-haste post-cinema and watching all sorts of things that are just exciting and may find myself in.
And you were saying as well, when I said before, that you could see another project. Well, you're not sure if you do it, but there's so much potential.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many things you could say about Tom. He's amazing. So that it was quite, you had to find a route in to make it a shorter film, but yeah, for sure. I think it's just the particular aspect, as archives always are as well, just the amount of material. I think there's probably what 6 hours of footage if we're going to use a Valentina set, but yeah, definitely. It was pretty inspiring to think about what could be the future.
One last question.
You produce contemporary art pieces out of the past. So I'd like you to reflect on the historical value that you attribute your art pieces, and in particular the role that nostalgia may play in mediating some what you the account of the past on the part of the subject of your analysis and past itself.
I'll jump in if you want. Yeah, so I mean, what I found fascinating about listening to the stuff about Judy Garland was that wasn't my understanding of Judy Garland. I thought Judy Garland was this loved figure, a star, and she was embraced and kind of pitied in some ways towards the end of her life. What I was really struck by within this archive was actually there was a range of responses. There was a lot of judgment about the choices that she made, but also a kind of a knowledge of the difficulties that she experienced. And I really love Valentina Bold's intervention, where she asks did you know that at the time, and or is this kind of stuff that you subsequently learned? So I think Valentina's intervention kind of undercuts any opportunity for nostalgia. I think listening to the past inevitably will bring up nostalgia, but for me, I suppose it'd be inspired by the writing of someone like Svetna Boym, where she talks about reflective and restorative nostalgia. And for me, what I think the Judy Garland thing is doing is kind of problematizing the figure of Judy Garland in these memories in British cinema going. So I don't think it's recouped for, I don't think MGM would be, you know, wanting this piece. I think this is very much, it speaks against and with the grain of the story.
I would say I think nostalgia is always dangerous, isn't it? If we're looking, and yet it's so attractive and appealing, and sometimes we want to enter a happy memory of the past, which may or may not be a true memory. But for me, with this archive, we're very aware when we watched the film and Tom's drawing these fantastic architectural buildings, we're aware of what happened in Glasgow in terms of the decimation of Glasgow post-war, in terms of planning, in terms of motorway planning, in terms of buildings disappearing. So that, which is allied to the Glasgow effect, you know, this incredible health problems that we have. So I think when we think about the built environment in a city like Glasgow and these fantastic cinemas, which you're reminded of in this space as well, nostalgia is there, and the opposite is always going to be there as well. And when I think, you know, talking to our grandparents about their cinema going, it was magical for them. It was magical to enter these spaces. But when they talk about the past, they would also talk about hardship. And, you know, you're aware of that other thing. And I think that the flea pits, we would call them, you said the louse pits, that idea that you might not always have money to go. I think it's the two sit side by side, but I can see the nostalgia. It's wonderful to escape sometimes.
I mean, I think Tom is bringing to life his nostalgia a bit, you know, making it a sort of concrete thing by creating these drawings. You know, obviously his head's filled with all these scenes, you know, actual vignettes which he's producing. So I think there was a reason to kind of show his train set and his idea of little miniature worlds, and that was quite important to him. And interesting that he had obviously seen a lot of film and that sort of storytelling narrative. So I mean, I think I was interested, as I sort of mentioned earlier, that I to kind of give us a character sketch of him as well, and not just to see him as a sort of tool in history, but to see his own, what his own context is, and his kitchen, and his, you know, life, and his, I mean, there's again so much more I could have done, but I think, I mean, it's the stories that we tell that are the, make up history, aren't they? And I guess he's an actual storyteller, so to try and get some sense of that in the way that he spoke, not to edit him to, you know, he could talk a lot, he can talk your ear off, he's a kind of amazing storyteller in that way. So just to capture that as much as possible within the time frame and not make it too long.
Thanks again to everyone for thanks.
Right in the